Yo legends. Welcome to Fanfiction Legend. Grab your headphones, because today's story is about to hit different. Disclaimer. I do not claim ownership of this story. All rights belong to the original creators. Marvel, fighting against Avengers. Page 1. He is fighting against the Avengers in Marvel. Author, Fun Nuts. Summary. Thanos is not a person, but a spirit. This spirit made the entire Avengers and even the entire universe tremble. When the scales of fairness and justice tilt, if no one stands up to correct this injustice, then in the end everything will end in destruction. Rory's appearance just broke a delicate balance. When 3 American captains appeared in front of him at the same time. When the 2 generations of Supreme Sorcerers, Ancient One and Strange, appeared at the same time. When 1,000 Avengers members appear at the same time. Rory knew, he was in big trouble. Chapter 1, Passing by the Future. My name is Rory, and I'm a little unlucky guy. Plus I'm a mad scientist. During an experiment, the municipal government temporarily overhauled the lines, causing a power outage in the laboratory and a minor experimental accident. So I ascended on the spot and successfully joined the army of traversers. At the same time, I am a lucky person because I traveled to the Marvel Universe, a world where technology is completely unreasonable. I am very happy to be born into this world. The good news is that I can fully display my talents in this world. The bad news is that I traveled to the MCU universe in 1969, 2000, and 12 years before the Battle of New York in 43. If I could live to that time, I would be an old man of almost 70 years old. Perhaps I would die of old age before Thanos snapped his fingers. Now that I'm here, how can I accept this ending? To this end, I spent a whole year planning one thing, which was to secretly infiltrate the secret base of the SSR, Strategic Scientific Corps, located in the New Jersey military base. Uncover the secrets of the cosmic cube and explore the vast universe. One summer in 1970. Inside a New Jersey military base. Rory had a fake beard on his face and large frog-shaped glasses on his nose. It was almost impossible to tell that he was Chinese. He lowered the brim of his hat and hid behind a pile of supply boxes, his eyes fixed on the iron door with E47 written on it not far away. First, he needs to bypass the guard and enter the door, then crack the elevator code to enter the SSR underground base, and then find the warehouse where 084 is stored. S.H.I.E.L.D. likes to collect some strange and bizarre things, and then put them in the warehouse to gather dust, which is a waste of resources. Seeing that the time was almost up, Rory quietly took out a few small bottles wrapped with coils from his backpack and hid them in various places in the base. Then he slipped into the restaurant and, while a few chefs were smoking and chatting outside, stuffed an unknown object into the microwave, set the temperature and time, and immediately turned and left. After going around in a circle, returned to the entrance of the SSR organization. Hiding in the corner, looking at the watch and counting down silently. 54,321. At the same time as the countdown ended, a deafening explosion and flames shot into the sky from the direction of the restaurant. Boom. The heat wave even swept over Rory. As the explosion sounded, the base suddenly fell into chaos. Some people were frightened and ran away, while others reacted and ran towards the restaurant to put out the fire. The guard guarding the entrance of the SSR organization ran to check the situation. Rory, who was hiding in the corner, took the opportunity to dive into the iron door without hesitation, took out a screwdriver and pried open the elevator control panel. For people of this era, the circuit design inside the control panel is too complicated to imagine, but for Rory it is a piece of cake. Cut one wire harness and connect it to another, then use a crimping pin to short circuit the 2 points and start the elevator directly, bypassing the controller. Buzz. The elevator started working immediately after pressing the button. Rory closed the control panel again, stood up, straightened his military uniform, and stood in front of the elevator door. Ding. The elevator door slowly opened, and Rory put on his fake work badge and walked out of the elevator as if nothing had happened. Because he failed to find the construction drawings of this place in advance, Rory could only wander around aimlessly. Passing by an empty secretary's desk in front of an office door, he picked up the coffee cup on the table and held it in his hand. While pretending to drink the coffee, he concealed his expression and observed his surroundings. Memorize the route you have taken and the address of each office in your mind. At the end of this corridor was a T-junction. The door of a room on the right corridor opened and 2 staff members walked out. Rory subconsciously turned left. When the 2 people just left and were about to turn back, Rory suddenly found a number plate 084 hanging on the iron door at the end of the corridor. This door does not have an electronic lock, but the oldest cross-lock cylinder. Rory, who had prepared for the situation, took out the lock-picking tool from his backpack, inserted it into the lock cylinder, and slowly tested the thimble inside the door lock. While he was busy unlocking the door, a guard appeared behind him and happened to notice that Rory was behaving strangely at the end of the corridor. He looked at Rory with a scrutinizing look, slowed down his pace and approached quietly. The guard's right hand slowly rested on the butt of the gun, and he would immediately draw his gun if Rory made the slightest movement. Click. Fortunately, Rory was very fast and could easily get in and out. The guard behind him dispelled his suspicions after seeing Rory go in. After entering the door, there is still a long corridor with several offices on each side, and at the end of the corridor is a huge storage room. It just happens to match a certain part in the movie. Whew. After confirming that he had found the right place, Rory breathed a sigh of relief. But now is not the time to relax, so I quickly went into the storage room and observed the surrounding environment. The warehouse is huge, stretching as far as the eye can see, and is filled with miscellaneous items in a mess. Rory clearly remembered every detail in the movie, and after a brief recollection, he immediately locked the secret safe that might contain the cosmic cube. The second container after the two glowing containers is easy to find. Then Rory was in trouble again. He didn't have Iron Man's high-tech rapid cutting ability, so it might not be so easy to open the container. Electronic code? No, it's a misplaced password. There's no reset function. Rory took out a screwdriver, removed the side panel, and followed the wiring to find the core control board. After turning on the flashlight and observing carefully, he shook his head. Is it a signal switch? There's no mechanical switch. If the base loses power, the control unit will be disconnected and the safe will be locked, so it can't be unlocked by disconnecting the power. So it's a virtual signal? Rory talked to himself for a long time and finally thought of a way to crack the problem. As we all know, 0 and 1 in binary represent on and off. If an electronic combination lock has 0 numbers from 9 to 10, and the password is 10 digits long, 10 to the power of 10, that is, there can be up to billion completely different password combinations. Rory shook his head, turned around and went to another container, forcibly removed the control panel, and then removed a small single diode from the control panel. Then use a wiring harness to connect the two ends and reconnect them to the control terminal of the target container. The next thing to do is to transmit the signal emitted by the diode into it. Rory held his breath and carefully touched the other side of the wiring harness to the power port on the circuit board. Laugh. The sound of electricity was heard, bringing out sparks. Banging. Done. A smile finally appeared on Rory's tense face. There was a sound of unlocking from the metal container. After unlocking, the entire container bounced to both sides, and a faint blue light shone on Rory's face. Wow, the cosmic cube. So what a thief. Rory was not stupid enough to touch the Rubik's Cube directly with his hands. The last fool who did that was Red Skull. He was then directly teleported to Vormir by the Rubik's Cube and stayed there forever to guard the Soul Stone. Empty the briefcase, then use 2 iron plates to pick up the Rubik's Cube and put it inside the briefcase. Close the container again, lock it, and close the side covers. Okay, you're done. Clapping his hands contentedly, Rory picked up the briefcase and returned the same way. You certainly weren't born here. The idea that created me is. Okay, let's say you were SHIELD and wanted to create an intelligence organization like the Nazis, where would you hide it? Hidden in plain sight. Steve Rogers answered while looking in the direction of the SSR underground base. Captain America Steve Rogers and Iron Man Tony Stark, who traveled through time and space, wandered around the base. Communicate while strolling around. In the end, it was Steve Rogers who found the secret base of the predecessor of SHIELD. Page 2. Tony Stark reached out and tapped his glasses twice, and immediately the electric perspective and thermal imaging appeared in front of his eyes. There was indeed an elevator running downwards behind the wall with the number E47 written on it. The two looked at each other, and walked over together in unison. At this time, Rory was already standing in front of the elevator. With a ding sound, the elevator door slowly opened. Rory, who was about to go in, saw the 3 people in the elevator and was so shocked that he shuddered all over. Good luck on your mission, Captain. Good luck with your plans, Doctor. Rory recognized Captain America Steve Rogers and Iron Man Tony Stark immediately. After brushing past Tony Stark, Rory forced himself to remain calm as he entered the elevator and turned around to stand near the elevator door. The black lady's attention was almost entirely focused on Steve Rogers, and she didn't pay much attention to Rory, who came in later. Are you new here? The Ant asked Captain America with a smile. Rory pretended to be distracted and turned to look at Steve Rogers, because that would be the reaction of any normal person. Steve pursed his lips, glanced at Rory and the black woman, and replied, not exactly. The 3 of them entered the lower office area together. Rory was the first to walk out of the elevator, carrying the briefcase containing the Tesseract and walking down the corridor. When he saw the sign for the bathroom, he turned around and went in. Rory crawled into the toilet partition and immediately took off his sunglasses and put them at his feet. Through the reflection of the lenses, he saw Steve Rogers waiting at the bathroom door. Pym particles. Rory himself didn't expect such a coincidence to happen. He actually met Captain America and Iron Man who traveled through time at the same time. After thinking for a moment, a perfect plan gradually formed in Rory's mind. A minute later, there was a noise in the corridor outside. Steve Rogers glanced at Dr. Pym who was running away and immediately slipped out. Rory put on his sunglasses and followed closely behind. Steve Rogers held down the brim of his hat with one hand and looked around. Seeing that no one noticed him, he went straight into Dr. Pym's laboratory. After walking around the laboratory, he finally found the Pym particles he wanted on a counter. With a smile that symbolized victory on his face, he was about to reach out to take it when Luo Rui's voice suddenly came from behind him. "Soldier, what are you doing?" Swish. Steve Rogers immediately retracted his arm and turned around, only to find that it was Rory who came down the same elevator with him. What a coincidence. At this time, Rory tilted his head slightly and looked at Steve with curiosity. Ahem. Steve Rogers hadn't figured out how to explain, but Rory spoke first and gave him a way out. "Soldier, be careful. That's Dr. Pym's research, so don't mess with it." "Well, I'm just curious." Luo Rui waved his hand. "You have nothing to do here. Go out first. Otherwise, when Dr. Pym comes back and finds that someone has touched his things, he will definitely be angry and may even fire you. P.S. The signing has been completed, you can read with confidence. I'm looking for your collection of my new book, some recommendation votes and investments. I'm asking all the book lovers to give me a little support. Nut would like to thank all the big guys here. Chapter 2. Take me away. What the hell? Where is it? Tony Stark searched the warehouse for a long time but didn't see any trace of the Tesseract. Huh? What is this? Tony Stark immediately turned on his glasses to scan and seemed to have found some traces. Just as I was about to take a closer look, I heard shouting from not far away. Is that Sarah? Sarah. Tony Stark immediately lost his composure when he saw the face of the person who came, and subconsciously wanted to turn around and run away. Hey. The door's this way, buddy. The person who came was Tony Stark's father, Howard Stark. No matter how old Tony is, he can never calm down when facing his old father, especially his deceased father. I'm looking for Dr. Sarah, did you see me? Oh no, I didn't see anybody. While Tony Stark was busy reminiscing with his old father, Steve on the other side also ran into trouble. He was driven out of Dr. Pym's laboratory by Rory and was pacing in the corridor, wondering whether he should rush in and rob the Pym particles. At this moment, he turned around and saw the black lady in the elevator walking towards him with two guards, obviously coming for him. Steve quickly dodged into another office, narrowly avoiding the guard. Just as he was about to leave, Steve suddenly noticed a photo of himself when he first joined the army, looking skinny, on the desk in this office. Holding the photo frame in his hand, his thoughts were immediately drawn into the depths of his memory. Those were years that he would never forget in his life. When I turned around, I saw two lines of black words written on the office door, Director Margaret Carter. The woman he thought about day and night. A figure walked out from behind the blinds, and Captain America Steve couldn't look away after seeing it. Next door. After driving Captain America away, Rory immediately put the Pym particles on the counter into his backpack. He did not take all of them. He only took 11 of the 10 bottles of Pym particles. Before Dr. Pym came back, Rory returned the same way and took the elevator back to the ground. By this time the riot in the barracks had subsided and the fire in the restaurant had been put out. Rory walked nonchalantly to a parked jeep and placed his briefcase and backpack on the passenger seat. I started the engine and was about to leave when I saw Stark and his son walking out of the base. Tony said something absent-mindedly, and said goodbye sadly after seeing his old father off to the car. Tony turned around and met Rory's gaze. Rory smiled and waved to Tony, then stepped on the accelerator and drove away. Tony was puzzled but didn't pay much attention to it. He couldn't save his world without finding the Rubik's Cube, so he planned to go back and continue looking for it, but he happened to meet Steve Rogers coming out of the underground base. Hey Captain, I can't find the Rubik's Cube. Did you get the Pym particles? Captain America shook his head anxiously, I didn't get it either. Do you remember the man in the elevator? He kicked me out of Dr. Pym's office. When I went back, there was only one bottle of Pym particles left. I got fooled. That person. Tony pointed behind him, he just left. Did he take the Rubik's Cube with him? Tony was furious at the thought of his brush with the cosmic cube. Hurry up. Boom. Boom. There were continuous explosions in various places in the base. The explosions were not very powerful, but after the explosions, a thick green smoke appeared and covered the entire base. Those who inhaled the green smoke fell to the ground one after another. Damn, he's a bad boy. Save people first. Steve Rogers couldn't just stand by and watch someone die, so the matter of the cosmic cube and the Pym particles had to be put aside for a while. As long as Rory was still alive, they would definitely be found. On the other side, Rory, who was driving the jeep, threw the controller into the grass on the side of the road. Drive along the highway towards the city of Trenton, 27 kilometers away. An hour later, Tony Stark, wearing the Iron Man suit, followed the trail and arrived at an abandoned barn on the outskirts of Trent, London. Banging. Tony fell from mid-air to the ground, and the iron suit made a heavy sound when it hit the ground. He just stood there, looking through his mask at the jeep outside the barn. Rory was sitting leisurely on the hood of the jeep playing with stones. When he saw Iron Man flying over, he looked curious and inquisitive. "You are a genius to design such a perfect suit." Clang clang. Tony took a few steps forward and said, "I know I'm a genius, sir. You took something you shouldn't have. Please give it to me. I'm very opposed to violence, and if you disagree, I don't mind using violence. Of course, as long as you can meet my conditions." Rory jumped from the front of the car to the ground. He walked up to Tony and gently stroked the Iron Man suit, as if he was admiring a work of art. Tony thought Rory had some special hobby and quickly took 2 steps back. He removed his mask and asked, "What are the conditions?" "Tell me." "Well, it's very simple, take me with you." Before Rory could finish his words, he saw Steve riding a motorcycle from a distance. After Steve jumped off the motorcycle and stood next to Tony, Rory continued, "My condition is that you take me to your timeline." "How about that?" "What? How can it be? How did you know?" Page 3. Tony and Captain America both looked as if they had seen a ghost. Rory shrugged, "There's nothing to be surprised about. There are many special people in this world, not just you." Tony and Captain America exchanged glances, and after exchanging opinions, Tony was the first to shake his head. "Impossible. Doing so could lead to very serious consequences. I think it would be easier to forcibly retrieve something that doesn't belong to you." "You want to rob them?" Rory chuckled. "I advise you not to do that, because I've already hidden those 2 things. If I don't tell you, you'll never find them in your lifetime. The consequence is that you 2 will stay here forever." In order to deal with the pursuit after being exposed, Rory had already prepared various response plans in advance. He hid the cosmic cube and the Pym particles in an unknown place where no one could find them except himself. "Honestly, it's not worth taking the risk. I just want to take a look at the future. It won't do anything to you." Rory spread his hands to express his wish. "We need to discuss this." Tony and Captain America walked to a nearby place, whispering something to each other. After a moment, Tony returned to Rory and said, "Okay, we agreed to your request. Can you give it to me now?" Rory looked at Tony as if he was an idiot, and this look deeply hurt Tony's heart. How could Tony, who claims to be a genius, say such idiotic things? Ahem, of course not. What I mean is that in order to ensure fairness, you should take the thing out for me to confirm. Tony tried his best to cover up his stupid behavior just now. "First you should take off your suit, then we can talk about cooperation calmly." Rory didn't want to talk to Tony, who was sometimes mentally. Tony, who was in a passive position, was helpless and had to put away his suit first. For the first time, Rory intuitively felt the power of the nanosuit. He could not understand the working principle of the nanosuit at all, and he could not even imagine how the transformation into nanoform was accomplished. "Wow, this is magical. If only I could have this technology." "I'd rather stay here forever," Tony replied firmly. "Okay." Rory looked at Tony, then walked up to Steve, pointed at Steve's wrist and said, "Sir, please give me this thing in your hand, okay?" Tony and Captain America were both stunned, because what Rory wanted was the time-space locator. Without this thing, Steve would not be able to travel back to the future. Tony quickly said, "Hey, kid, how about I give you mine?" "No, stand still. I know the battlesuit you're wearing can change its form at will, so the one you gave me is very likely a fake. Don't treat me as an idiot like you." Let Tony stay where he is, then turned to Captain America and said, "Sir, give me this now and we can make a deal. This is the only chance. I'll give you 3 seconds to think about it." 32. "I'll give it to you." Captain America groaned. The 2 superheroes were completely controlled by Rory and had no room for resistance at all. He took off the time-space shuttle locator and handed it to Rory, then asked coldly, "Where is it?" "Don't be in a hurry, take it one step at a time. I'm hungry, so why not find a place to eat something first?" Rory smiled and put the locator on his wrist. He got back into the jeep and waved, "Come on up, I'll take you guys to eat hamburgers. Before they got the cosmic cube and the Pym particles, the two superheroes could only be at Rory's mercy. The jeep entered the city of Trenton and stopped in front of a hamburger restaurant. The three of them went in, ordered their food, and then found a random seat to sit down. Tony was the first to ask the question in his mind. Boy, how did you know that? You know what? You know that you came from the future? Rory asked with a smile after taking a sip of Coke. Tony nodded seriously. Rory said calmly, because I'm not from this timeline either. I was accidentally forced to travel through time during an experiment, but this era is too backward. I want to return to the world that belongs to me. Tony and Captain America fell silent at the same time, both of them wondering whether what Rory said was true or not. You are Iron Man Tony Stark, the mark I forged in the cave. You are Captain America Steve Rogers, an old popsicle who has been frozen for 70 years. You came here to save those who were wiped out by Thanos' snap of his fingers. I know everything you've been through. Do you believe me now? Rory didn't lie because he told the truth. Tony used technological glasses to observe Rory, and then artificial intelligence Friday analyzed it and came to the same conclusion. So, your purpose of getting the Tesseract and Pym particles ahead of time was to go home? Tony followed this train of thought and began to imagine, making Rory's actions make sense and reasonable. Well, you could say that. After eating the burgers, the three of them walked out of the store. Rory jumped into the jeep and said, I still have to make some preparations before leaving. Tony, if you don't want Steve to be left here forever, hurry up and make a new bracelet. See you tomorrow. Then he looked at Captain America and continued, please don't follow me. I've placed explosives where the Pym particles are stored. If I press this switch, the three of us will stay here forever. Hey, kid, hold on tight, I don't want to stay with you. Chapter 3, Being Fooled. I'm going to look for materials to make the space-time bracelet. You're responsible for following him and don't let him get away. Captain America grabbed Tony and asked with a frown, are you really going to take him back to the future? Tony said calmly, what else? Have you forgotten you don't have a time travel bracelet? This kid is very smart and must have made a detailed plan. We have to prepare for the worst. If we can't get the Rubik's Cube and the Pym particles, the only option is to take him back to the future. But Captain America wanted to say something. Tony consoled him, Captain, I know what you're trying to say. I mean, even though we can take him back, as long as we get the Tesseract and rescue everyone, we can still send him back here. He's just an ordinary person after all. Like sending the original stone back. Of course. Having reached a consensus, the two immediately began to act separately. Tony went to find materials to make a new time-space bracelet, while Captain America followed Rory to see if there was any chance to get the Rubik's Cube and Pym particles. Rory hummed a little tune as he drove his jeep into downtown Trenton. After turning several corners, he parked the car, looked directly behind him through the rearview mirror, got out of the car and immediately went into an apartment building. Just after Rory entered the apartment, Captain America suddenly appeared from around the corner. I followed Rory into the apartment quietly and didn't find anything special. It was just a very old and ordinary apartment. I looked around but couldn't find any sign of Rory. At this moment, the sound of doors opening and closing suddenly came from upstairs, and Captain America immediately walked up the stairs. Captain America had just reached the second floor when a door on the first floor was gently opened, revealing Rory's eyes that seemed to be smiling. Oh, I knew you wouldn't be honest. While Captain America was investigating the situation upstairs, Rory quietly left through the back door. After leaving the apartment building, cross a street and enter an unfinished building. Somewhere in the unfinished building, a very inconspicuous pull ring was opened, and after opening it, a ladder led to the basement. This is the secret base that Rory built after traveling through time. It is mainly used for various experiments and research. He originally planned to study the cosmic cube here, but he didn't expect to meet Captain America and Iron Man from the future. The plan has changed. Since we can go to the future, there is no need to stay here and mess around. After coming down, Rory took a Browning M1911 from the wall, put it in an armpit holster and hung it on his body. This kind of pistol is no different from a toy gun to Iron Man and Captain America. The reason they carry it is because it has other uses. Then Rory used various materials in the basement to make a small power rapid explosion bomb. By the way, I also studied Captain America's time travel bracelet. He found that the bracelet could not be disassembled at all. Tony Stark used nanomaterials to make it, and it was so seamless that there was no place to disassemble it. The bracelet screen can set the time, date, and location of time travel. With a light click of the button, a white time-traveling battle suit exactly the same as the one in the movie instantly appeared on Rory. Holy crap! That's so cool. It is no different from a normal tights. Click the bracelet again and the time-space shuttle suit will return to the bracelet. After testing it a few times, he put away the homemade bomb, took out a bucket of industrial alcohol from the corner and poured it all over the basement. Climbing back to the ground, Rory turned and threw a lit match inside. Boom! The fire suddenly lit up. Luo walked outside without looking back. Although there was no explosion, he was a real man. Once back on the road, Rory saw Steve wandering around looking for him. Luo greeted with a smile, "Hey, why don't you go to bed so late?" Looking for a place to rest." Rory smiled and said nothing, not trying to expose Steve's embarrassing lie. After a moment, he smiled and said, "How about staying at my place for a night? I'll consider it as your reward for taking me back to the future." Captain America was about to say something when he suddenly smelled a pungent odor. He turned around and immediately saw a fire burning in the abandoned factory. "Did you just set fire?" Rory shrugged and said nothing. Captain America rushed into the unfinished building, trying to control the fire inside by himself to prevent the entire city from being burned to ashes. After entering, we found that although the temperature here was very high, there was no sign of the fire spreading, and the flames coming out of the basement would quickly dissipate. Although he didn't know what Rory was up to, in Steve Rogers' mind, Rory had already been labeled a bad boy. When Steve came out of the unfinished building, Rory had disappeared completely. 2 hours later. Swoosh clang. Tony Stark landed in front of Captain America in his Iron Man suit, handed him a brand new bracelet and jokingly said, "Captain, promise me you won't give it away again, okay?" Page 4. Captain America's mouth twitched as he took the new bracelet and said, "Didn't you say anything when I gave it to that guy?" It's not that he wanted to give it away, but he had no choice but to do so. "Where did that kid go?" "Do not know." "Captain, this is not like your style. How can you not even keep an eye on a living person?" Tony teased. "You also said he was alive. If it was a corpse, I guarantee he wouldn't slip away quietly." Two elderly people's daily bickering. "I think I know where he went." Tony looked in the direction of the end of the road, and it happened to be the abandoned barn where Rory was found yesterday. He put on his Iron Man suit again, picked up Steve and flew over without even saying hello. A moment later the two landed outside the barn, just in time to see Rory emerge from the warehouse. "Hi, I thought I had to wait until dawn to see you guys, but you came so quickly." Tony ignored Rory's teasing, but looked at Rory's right hand and asked, "Kid, can you tell me what you have in your hand?" Luo raised his right hand and said with a smile, "You've guessed it, right? It's a bomb wrapped in PIM particles. As long as I press it lightly, it will, boom." Captain America and Tony both became nervous, fearing that Rory would accidentally touch the switch. Luo waved his hand, "I'm not nervous at all, why are you two nervous?" "Where is the cosmic cube?" Steve asked calmly. Luo pointed to a well not far away. "It's at the bottom of the well. As a token of my sincerity, I can give you the Rubik's Cube, but I want to carry the remaining PIM particles myself." "Okay." Tony nodded in agreement immediately. "Tony, what if he..." Steve wanted to say something, but Tony gave him a reassuring look. A few minutes later. Steve, dripping wet, salvaged the Tesseract from the bottom of the well, and Rory gave the returning PIM particles to Tony. "You two, I'm afraid we have to say goodbye here. I said I was going to the future, but I didn't say I was going to your future. Bye." Rory didn't intend to keep Captain America and Iron Man in this timeline, and he didn't want the world in their timeline to be destroyed, so he gave them the Rubik's Cube and a small amount of PIM particles. He himself planned to take the remaining PIM particles and go on a spontaneous time travel. Set the bracelet's time to 2008 New York. As soon as he finished speaking, Luo pressed the start switch without hesitation. Call out. Rory disappeared in front of Captain America and Tony in the blink of an eye. Captain America said sadly, "I knew it would be like this." Tony smiled and said, "Don't worry, I designed the bracelet, he won't be able to escape." Chapter 4 Avengers. Assemble. Call out. Time travel completed. Rory was stunned when he saw the superheroes standing in a circle. Tony waved, "Hey kid, we meet again. How is it possible?" "I clearly." Tony smiled and said, "Are you trying to say that you have already set up other timelines, so why did you come to our timeline?" Luo nodded. Although he was a little confused, he still wanted to know why it turned out like this. Tony explained, "You did set the time, but you forgot that I designed this bracelet. I can change the program on it at any time through the internet." "Okay, I admit you're not an idiot. Although you're a little older, you're still smart enough." Puff. "This guy is interesting, I like him." A furry raccoon giggled. The tall Hulk, the long-haired, greasy-bellied Thor, James Rhodes in War Machine, Everyone was looking at the unfamiliar Rory. Tony came over and took away all the Pym particles, smiling faintly. All right, let him stay at the base for now. We'll deal with his affairs later. What we need to do now is to get the gems and rescue everyone. Hey, where's Natasha? Hawkeye Clint Barton said with difficulty. Natasha can't come back. Although Rory can move freely, he cannot leave the Avengers base. Because of Natasha's sacrifice, all the superheroes were plunged into grief, and no one cared about Rory at all, which made him feel a lot more relaxed. Friday, what is that kid doing? Tony, who was busy making the rough stone gloves, suddenly thought of Rory and asked the artificial intelligence casually. Boss, he didn't do anything. Call up the screen. Tony took off his work gloves and looked at the holographic panel, noticing Rory wasn't doing anything besides milling around. Rory in the holographic image strolled into the kitchen. Seeing Bruce Banner here, he casually greeted him. Hey, Dr. Banner, are you making tacos? Of course, would you like to have one? Although Bruce Banner is wearing the Hulk's coat, he looks very easygoing. Wearing the coat makes him less wild and more elegant. Dr. Banner casually handed Rory a piece of taco, and Rory waved his hands and said, I'm not used to eating this. Where are the ingredients? I want to make something I like. The cold storage is over there. It has almost everything you want. Dr. Banner pointed to the cold storage behind the kitchen. Half an hour later, Rory made a dish of scrambled eggs with tomatoes, a dish of broccoli with garlic sauce, and a dish of stewed beef brisket. The main course was hand-rolled noodles with egg sauce. Dr. Banner instantly lost interest in the taco in his hand because of its color, aroma, and taste. Would you like some? Rory set the table and invited Dr. Banner. Banner said shyly, is it okay? Of course, but you're a big guy, don't eat it all in one bite. On the other side, Tony, who was staring at the holographic screen, felt his stomach growl. He gritted his teeth, turned off the holographic image, and continued to work on his work. A few days later, Tony's version of the rough stone gloves was finally tested. The 6 rough stones emitting different brightness were inlaid on the metal gloves, which was magnificent. Looking at the excited superheroes, Rory chose to run away. The building will be razed to the ground soon, and he doesn't want to stay here and die. As soon as he ran out of the lab, he ran into Xingyun, who had also quietly slipped out. Rory blinked and waved awkwardly. Hi, I have diarrhea and I'm going to the bathroom. Xingyun glanced at Rory indifferently, as if he was looking at a dead person. Thank God. Amitba. Rory ran out of the base building, and after determining the direction, he plunged into the woods. The glove is finished, but who's going to do that fatal finger snap? Let me do it. Thor, the god of thunder, didn't even think twice and stepped forward to walk towards the gloves inlaid with raw stones. Hey, wait a minute. Tony and Captain America stood in front of Thor at the same time. Listen, I'm the most powerful Avenger, so this responsibility must fall on me. Maybe what you said is right, but this is not a question of responsibility. Several people were arguing over the use of gloves. I want to ask, what do you think is flowing in my blood now? Cheese sauce. Thor would not pay any attention to Rhodes's sharp words. He turned around and continued to say to Tony, lightning, it's lightning. Even if lightning flows, it's useless. Let me do it. Banner stood up after thinking for a long time. You all saw what happened to Thanos. None of you can withstand him even if he only has half his life left. How are you sure you can? I'm not sure, but this thing mainly emits gamma radiation. It's like it was specially prepared for me. On the other side, Rory felt that he still hadn't run far enough. He continued to run deeper into the woods. Looking back, I found that the Avengers base had activated the protection program and all the doors and windows were sealed with thick steel. It's about to begin. Boom. Suddenly there was a loud noise from the aircraft warehouse, and Thanos Temple 2 made a grand appearance. Rory was stunned and his jaw almost dropped to the ground. It may not seem like a big deal when watching it on TV, but when he is there in person, he can feel the oppressive feeling brought by Temple 2 more intuitively. It is no exaggeration to say that it covers the sky and the sun. A shadow fell over Rory, blocking out all light from the sun. Huh. Huh. Page 5. Huh. Rumble. The missiles launched by Temple 2 rushed towards the Avengers headquarters building like raindrops, the earth shook and the airwaves surged, and Rory in the woods was directly blown away by the spreading shockwave. When he opened his eyes again, the Avengers base had turned into ruins. The dust in the sky turned day into night. Rory struggled to get up. Suddenly, a flash of lightning struck from the sky. He could vaguely hear the sound of fighting coming from the deep pit. Cautiously approaching the edge of the pit, he saw Captain America being blown away by Thanos' sword, looking no more miserable than Rory. Damn, are they fighting already? Dozens of spires broke away from the main body of Temple Number 2 and fell to the ground. Countless vanguards walked out of the spires roaring. A blue light shone from Temple 2 to the ground, and Obsidian V appeared at the forefront of the vanguard army. After being beaten up, Captain America got up from the ground and showed the determination to go forward even if there are thousands of people against him. Alas, Thanos is too arrogant. If he hadn't talked so much nonsense, there might have been a chance of winning. As a descendant of the Eternals, Thanos is really strong. He fought against a group of superheroes alone. Although he was a little embarrassed, it does not mean that he really failed. If Tony Stark hadn't snapped his fingers at the last moment, it's hard to say how many of the Avengers would have survived. Coming. Countless circles of light appeared behind Captain America, and support troops were about to enter the battlefield. The Wakanda camp, the Camartage Guardian Wizard camp, the Interstellar Predator camp, and the Asgard refugee camp that wandered to Earth, a large number of military tanks and spaceships emerged from the light circle. The enlarged Ant-Man broke out of the ground and brought back Dr. Banner and the Raccoon. The shouts of the Avengers camp resounded throughout the world. Even Rory, who was hiding aside and watching the show, became excited and wanted to run down and join the army. Avengers, assemble! With the appearance of this classic quote, the final battle officially begins. Chapter 5 Fate, the disappearance of Rory. Guns and cannons roared, and the overwhelming army of Thanos and the Avengers camp were intertwined. Bright lights of various colors flashed by. The yellow and blue CP interaction between Iron Man Tony and Pepper Potts. There is Thor who flies up and down, there is the oversized Ant-Man who can kill a group of people with one kick, and there is Doctor Strange with the most amazing skills and his group of wizards. Superheroes are very powerful, but Thanos' army is so large that you can't see the end of it. Apart from a group of top superheroes who can kill everyone, the grassroots combat forces of the Avengers are obviously no match for Thanos' army. At this time, Thanos was already facing Scarlet Witch, and the angry Scarlet Witch was extremely powerful. Thanos can easily defeat Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor alone, but he is powerless against the angry Scarlet Witch. Seeing that he was about to be torn apart by this crazy woman, Thanos had no choice but to activate the artillery cluster of Temple Number 2. Boom. Boom. The powerful firepower coverage knocked the ground troops to the ground in a moment. Even the Scarlet Witch who was controlling Thanos was blown away by the blast. The Mage Army released a magic shield for defense, and the sea water that was blown back was blocked by Doctor Strange's powerful magic power. At this time, Rory gritted his teeth and stomped his feet, then slipped out from his hiding place and slowly moved towards Thanos. The battleship's artillery stopped firing and turned towards the sky. Captain Marvel, who carried the entire game, broke through the atmosphere and finally reached the main battlefield. The golden flash broke through the atmosphere with a long tail flame and rushed towards Thanos' Temple 2 at an extremely fast speed. Boom. The battleship was pierced through, shocking all the superheroes. With the addition of Captain Marvel Carol Danvers, the Avengers' declining situation immediately changed, and they even launched a counterattack against Thanos' army. Seeing Captain Marvel rushing towards the van that opened the quantum realm tunnel with the gemstone, Thanos, who was blown away, threw out a double sword at the critical moment to blow up the passage. The instantaneous shockwave blew everyone away. As luck would have it, the Infinity Gauntlet, which Captain Marvel didn't hold firmly, fell not far from Rory. Damn it, I'm going to die. Rory shrank his head and pretended to be dead, trying his best to blend in with the pile of rubble. The final round of the Infinity Gauntlet competition officially entered the finals. Iron Man Tony was the first to go up, and Tony was knocked away. Thor and Captain America came up and were also knocked away. Captain America was even knocked unconscious by a punch. Captain Marvel went up twice, but was knocked away by Thanos who took away the power gem and punched her. Iron Man glanced at Doctor Strange in the distance, then rushed towards Thanos who had obtained the gemstone. Bang. I am Destiny. Thanos said softly as he looked at the fallen Iron Man. Snapped. He snapped his fingers, but nothing happened. Thanos then realized that there was no original stone on the glove at all. The original stone had been transferred to the hands of Iron Man Tony Stark at some point. I am Iron Man. Snapped. Bang. Tony snapped his fingers almost at the same time as the M1911 in Rory's hand. After snapping his fingers, Rory felt a shock deep in his soul, an indescribable feeling. The whole world seemed to have changed, but it seemed that nothing had changed. A very contradictory illusion. Thanos suddenly felt a bite on his arm and turned to see Rory holding a gun. He took 2 steps forward, then turned into a puff of dust and disappeared between heaven and earth. Mr. Stark. Hey, Mr. Stark, can you hear me? Spider-Man came to Tony with a trembling voice. I'm Peter Parker, we defeated Mr. Stark, you did it. I'm sorry, Tony. Spider-Man choked out a sob, hoping Tony would say something. It wasn't until Pepper Potts came over that Tony finally uttered 2 words with difficulty. Friday. The vital signs are extremely weak. Pepper Potts suppressed her inner sadness, tears in her eyes, and said gently, "Tony, we will be fine, you can rest." Tony took his last breath, and the iconic power source in his chest gradually went out. Unable to hold back any longer, Pepper Potts burst into tears. Just when everyone was feeling sad, Rory behind them quietly came to the place where Thanos disappeared, picked up a tiny needle on the ground and put it in his pocket, then disappeared silently behind the ruins. The 57th phage infection experiment failed. The hormone-active atoms in Thanos' blood sample could not fuse. Chromosome gene interoperability is 99%, and DNA rejection is significant. Experimental idea: recombining DNA sequences, performing secondary chromosome programming, integrating the sugar profile of blood samples, and cultivating a third generation of Thanos blood samples. Rory was recording the experiment in front of the turned-on camera. He took the blood sample from the microscope, sighed, and walked to another test bench. Rory thought that the serum Captain America had used was a genetic enhancer, an additional enhancement brought about by some external substance. But after getting Thanos' blood sample, Rory found that he was wrong, and extremely wrong. The serum injected by Captain America is not an enhancement drug, but a change that fundamentally changes the genetic material information in Steve Rogers' body. If a person is a hard drive, all biological characteristics of the person, such as height, appearance, personality, etc., are written in this hard drive from birth, and the role of the serum is to forcibly tamper with this information to achieve individual enhancement effects. Steve is still Steve, but not the same Steve anymore. After many experiments, Rory finally confirmed this theory that had never been considered before. But when he wanted to extract the genetic information from Thanos' blood sample, he found that the genetic information of the descendants of the Eternals was very complex and could not be extracted individually. The most effective way is to weaken the information data in Thanos' blood sample. Similar to compression, compressing a 10 megapixel photo to 1 million pixels will keep the overall information unchanged, but it will become blurred. Rory didn't have a golden finger when he traveled through time, so he could only create his own golden finger. Theoretically, the form of the bloodline will not change after being compressed, but the intensity of the bloodline will change. Maybe it's 1/10 of Thanos's, maybe 1/millionth, the result is uncertain. The third iteration of the blood sample culture test has begun. Combined 1/2 sugar and acid, extracted 1/5 water, protein, and low molecular weight substances, and injected the same proportion of DNA for secondary incubation. Inject into the culture tank and wait for the blood sample to form on its own. After finishing his work, Rory sat in front of the computer to start the next calculation. The computing power of this computer is limited. If it were replaced with a supercomputer with the computing power of Iron Man, the calculation could be completed in minutes. While Rory was busy studying the serum, the Avengers on the other side had just finished Tony's funeral. "Captain, what should we do with those rough stones?" Falcon Sam walked up to Captain America and asked. Page 6. The Avengers base was destroyed and the new base has not been built yet. In order to avoid any further complications, Falcon Sam hopes to deal with the rough stones from other timelines as soon as possible. Captain America said, "Of course, we're going to send the stones back. By the way, has anyone seen Rory?" "Who's Rory?" Except for a few people who had come into contact with him, the other Avengers all looked confused. Chapter 6: Find him. Inside the meeting room of the Avengers' temporary base. All the superheroes gathered here. Steve stepped forward and opened a holographic screen to introduce. "Currently, we only know that this person's name is Rory, he is of Asian descent, and he is someone Tony and I brought back from the 1970 timeline." "Why bring such a person back?" Hawkeye Patton asked the question on behalf of everyone. Steve explained, "This person got the cosmic cube and Pym particles first, and he also knew that Tony and I went to 1970 from the future timeline. According to his own explanation, he's also from the future, the exact year is unknown, and he was accidentally transported to 1970. He wants Tony and I's help to return to his own timeline. I think you and Tony were both deceived by him." War Machine Rhodes walked around the conference table and came to the front. He took out a microcontroller and connected it to the holographic panel, and then the image of Iron Man Tony snapping his fingers appeared on the holographic panel. This is the footage recorded by the War Machine at the time. Under Rhodes' control, the screen began to rotate, and then the play button was pressed. Bang! Rory raised his pistol and aimed at Thanos and shot. "How did he get there? Did anyone see him on the battlefield at that time?" Steve asked, and all the superheroes shook their heads. "He's just an ordinary person, without any special abilities. Logically, he should run as far as possible." War Machine Rhodes fast-forwarded the scene and then pressed play again. In the holographic image, everyone was gathered around Tony, except Rory. "Look here," he picked up something from the ground. War Machine Rhodes pointed at the screen, then zoomed in and out again. "What is it, a bullet?" "No, judging by its shape, it should be something very sharp." Dr. Banner then stood up and said, "I know what it is." Everyone turned to look at Dr. Banner, who explained, "Rory doesn't have any special abilities, but he's not an ordinary person. He's a scientist with a lot of ideas. As for what he's holding in his hand, it's actually a needle made of vibranium." Dr. Banner shrugged. "Yes, I took a little bit of scraps from the storage room for him to study. It was really just a little bit, probably less than 1 gram. I didn't expect him to make it into a needle." At this point, Banner was stunned for a moment, then suddenly realized, "I understand, he wants Thanos' blood sample." Dr. Banner has experienced this before. Dr. Samuel Stern once cloned the Hulk's blood samples, and those blood samples created the monster Abomination. Everyone else has heard more or less about Dr. Banner's story. War Machine shrugged and said, "After destroying one Thanos, another Thanos comes, and it's a scientist Thanos." Steve immediately said, "We must find Rory as soon as possible, destroy Thanos' blood sample, and finally send him back to the original timeline. How can we find him? No one has seen him since the war ended, and no one knows where he went. We'll use satellite footage, city surveillance, cell phone, and computer cameras, any means we can use. We must find him, otherwise the consequences will be disastrous." Record, time 21:33, 65th blood sample infection experiment, test subject code 13, 4th iteration of Thanos blood sample, compressed to 1/27th concentration, experiment begins. Rory injected his own plasma into the container, then took out the Thanos serum that had just been peeled off from the centrifuge and drew an appropriate amount and dripped it into the container. In the blink of an eye, the lavender serum and Rory's plasma entangled together and emitted a faint glow. After a while, it turned dark purple. Rory quickly used a pipette to draw a sample and dropped it onto a glass slide, and immediately observed it under a microscope. Through the microscope, it can be seen that Rory's blood cells have undergone major changes. The division speed increased, the activity increased, and Rory's DNA changed, breaking down and then recombining. An unidentified fragment was replaced by Thanos' gene. After observing and recording, Rory put the fused blood sample into the analyzer to observe the chromosomal changes. After a busy day, he returned to the camera. The experiment didn't fail, but it didn't succeed either. We've made new discoveries about bloodline fusion. Thanos' serum is too strong, so we still need to continue iterating and compressing it. Turn off the camera. Rory took a can of soup from the shelf, poured it into a bowl, and then placed it on the heating device on the test bench to heat it. It heats up in 2 minutes and you can just pick up a spoon and start eating. While eating, he was fiddling with the time-space shuttle bracelet on the test bench. He had studied this bracelet for a long time but could not figure out the principle behind it. There was a small box under the test bench, which contained half a Pym particle. When Tony Stark traveled through time and space just now, all the Pym particles were taken away, leaving only half on him. He probably forgot about it. Tony and Steve traveled back to the past, using up exactly 1 Pym particle each way, while Rory only traveled once, so he still had enough Pym particles for one use. The bracelet and Pym particles alone are not enough, they need to be used in conjunction with a machine to complete time and space travel, which is a condition he currently does not have. After eating the canned soup and barely filling his stomach, he threw the can into the trash bag and walked out of the laboratory carrying the trash bag. Just as he threw away the garbage bag, a black guy passing by suddenly reached out and pushed Rory. "Get out of the way, little brat, you're in the way." Rory glanced at Xiaohei and didn't say anything. He is just an ordinary person, and the other party is a 3-headed black man. If he causes trouble, he will definitely be the one who suffers. "Kid, this is Hell's Kitchen. You need to adapt to life here." The old man from the fruit shop next door came over to comfort Rory and handed him a green apple. "Thank you." Rory had no expression. After taking the apple, he stuffed $2 into the hands of the old man in the fruit shop, then lowered the brim of his hat and left without looking back. Rory didn't know that the Avengers were looking for him, he just simply didn't want to be found by those superheroes. After purchasing daily necessities and chemical test reagents, it was already night when we returned to the underground laboratory. Not long after Rory left the street, a motorcycle suddenly drove through the intersection he had just walked through and stopped in front of a convenience store. Beep. "Clint, I'm here, where are you?" Steve, wearing a jacket, got off the motorcycle, took out his cell phone and dialed Hawkeye Barton's communicator. "I'm behind you." Hawkeye Barton walked out of the convenience store. "I just checked it out. This is the surveillance footage from the supermarket on the next block. Although his face isn't shown, his physique is very similar to the Rory you're looking for. Steve watched the surveillance footage and nodded, it should be him. He left on foot with daily necessities, which means he is nearby. Chapter 7, Encountering a Drunkard. Rory's serum tests were progressing very slowly. Looking at the sets of experimental data, Rory didn't know where the problem lay. He only knew that the compressed Thanos serum did not have a strong rejection reaction, but Rory's blood was unable to carry the genetic genes in the chromosomes. Rory once thought that if chromosomes were compared to disks, perhaps there was too much data in Thanos serum, and the disk in his blood could not store all the data. The problem is that genetic data cannot be changed, something the Celestials, who created the Eternals, might be able to do. Rory thought hard and finally came up with another idea. It would be great if I could get a blood sample from Captain America Steve. With a reference, maybe I could find something different. Did it? The surveillance alarm suddenly sounded. Rory collected his thoughts and went to the computer screen to adjust the picture. The person who appeared on the screen was Hawkeye Barton. He was holding a photo and saying something at the front desk of the apartment. Rory quickly turned on the radio. Have you ever seen this person? The apartment receptionist shook his head. No, I haven't seen this person. Maybe you should look somewhere else. Hawkeye Barton didn't give up. Instead, he showed his shield ID and pointed to the apartment building and said, "Can I go up and take a look?" "Of course, feel free to do so." Rory was not nervous. His laboratory was in the basement and was sublet through a second-hand agency, so the apartment front desk did not have his information. The Avengers are looking for me? Rory pinched his chin and fell into deep thought. Then he turned off the surveillance camera, lay down on the camp bed, covered himself with a blanket and fell asleep. Hawkeye Barton, who was upstairs, walked around the apartment and found nothing. He went downstairs and left the apartment directly. When we got to the street, Captain America just came out of another building. Barton shook his head, nothing was found. Maybe we made a mistake. No, Rory is very smart. Tony and I have both been fooled by him before, so we have to look more carefully. Rory got Thanos' blood sample, and this became a big worry for Captain America. He won't give up until he finds Rory. It was already 2:30 in the morning when Rory woke up. After a quick wash, I sat in front of the computer and turned on the surveillance camera. There was no one on the street. He then disguised himself and walked out of the apartment with several homemade signal receivers. He planned to connect these signal receivers to street surveillance in several nearby blocks to expand his monitoring range. Cut the rubber covering of the signal line, install the signal receiver, and then simply hide it and you're done. Page 7. After installing several signal receivers in succession, I only have one left. However, the installation location is not very good, as it is right across the street from a bar. Every few minutes people were coming in and out of the bar. After waiting for a while, seeing that the drunks hardly noticed the side, Rory carefully pried open the monitoring cover, found the signal line and repeated the previous operation. I had just finished installing it and was about to close the cover when someone suddenly bumped into me. A strong smell of alcohol came. The person who staggered past Rory was an alcoholic, and a female alcoholic. Her long black hair swayed from side to side, and she wore a black jacket, jeans, and a pair of Martin boots. Rory immediately recognized the woman as Jessica Jones from the Defenders. As if he thought of something, Rory's eyes suddenly lit up, and he immediately closed the surveillance cover and chased after him. After turning a corner, a dark shadow suddenly appeared in front of Rory, and then a huge force pressed Rory against the wall. "Why are you following me?" Jessica Jones burped, and the strong smell of alcohol hit her face. Rory raised his hands to indicate that he meant no harm and explained, "No, I just saw you, a girl, walking down the street alone and wanted to see if you needed any help." "I don't need your help, and you can't help me. Listen, if you follow me again, I'll make you suffer." Jessica Jones lowers Rory down from the wall. She already knew that Rory was just an ordinary person and could not cause any harm to her. But Rory didn't give up. He continued to follow Jessica Jones, keeping a certain distance while raising his hand to gently support her. It didn't help much, but at least it kept her walking in a straight line. Jessica Jones gave 2 gentle pushes and then let Rory support her. Only then did she realize that Rory was an Asian with handsome eyebrows and bright eyes. After looking at it for a while, he hugged Rory and said with a smile, "Hey, do you want to spend a wonderful night with me?" Jessica Jones was notoriously promiscuous, and Rory didn't want her to collapse the bed and break his back while sitting on it. He was about to say no, but then he remembered his purpose and said, "Before that, I think you should take a hot bath first." Jessica Jones thought Rory had accepted her invitation, so she smiled drunkenly and hooked Rory's arm and walked towards the apartment. A few minutes later we arrived at Jessica Jones's residence. As soon as he entered the house, Rory was thrown onto the bed by Jessica Jones, who pressed him down and started kissing him. Rory struggled and shouted, "Hey, we agreed to take a shower first. This is not wonderful at all." His Rory's shirt was torn into pieces, and not only Rory's shirt was torn, but also his own clothes. What the hell? Rory wanted to resist, but it was of no avail. He was just an ordinary person and was no match for Jessica Jones. Fortunately, he did not forget the purpose of his trip and secretly took out a bullet with a needle. Without any hesitation, he stabbed Jessica Jones in the neck. Ow! Boom! Now Jessica Jones was even more excited, and the result of her excitement was that the bed, which was not very strong to begin with, collapsed directly. More than an hour later, Rory walked out of Jessica Jones's apartment, holding his aching waist. Looking at the vibranium needle in his hand, this was a blood sample he obtained by selling his body, and it was extremely precious. Rory secretly swore in his heart that if he had the chance in the future, he would definitely take revenge. He would keep his word. Rory returned to the laboratory slowly and immediately started working on the experiment. Culture Jessica Jones's blood sample, set aside a small amount for observation and record, and analyze the data. The focused Rory was busy for more than 10 hours and didn't even have time to eat a bite of food. Oh, this is amazing. The activity is not much less than Thanos's. Mutated chromosomes. A novel idea suddenly popped up in Rory's mind. If his blood is a disk, and Thanos's data is full and cannot be written to, then can Jessica Jones's blood sample be used as a USB drive to connect the two? Rory's brain suddenly became groggy after losing his concentration, and he realized that more than 10 hours had passed. The sudden feeling of fatigue made Rory unable to hold on any longer. He threw himself onto the camp bed and fell asleep instantly. Chapter 8 I'm not a bad person. Write Thanos' genetic genes into Jessica Jones's chromosomes, and then create a new serum to fuse with Rory's blood. The theory is feasible, but it only exists in theory. When Rory woke up, he didn't rush to start the experiment. He planned to culture more blood samples from Jessica Jones. There was a shortage of raw materials, and he was always hesitant when doing experiments, which he really disliked. While watching the surveillance, I made some fast food to fill my stomach. You haven't given up yet? Several more surveillance screens appeared on the monitor, and Rory saw Captain America Steve Rogers on one of them. This guy still hasn't given up looking for him. Rory began to think about how to get Captain America's blood sample. Clint, how are you doing over there? Captain, we haven't found any useful clues. I think we should call for more support. After the final battle, the Avengers were busy with their own affairs. Thor handed Asgard over to Valkyrie, the Valkyrie, and then went into outer space with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Captain Marvel is so elusive that not even her shadow can be seen. Dr. Banner and War Machine Rhodes were busy rebuilding the Avengers base, and the Guardian Mages didn't even need to be considered. Scarlet Witch Wanda didn't know where she had gone, and Spider-Man Peter Parker was busy going to school, so the only one who could be called for help was Sam the Falcon. Captain America Steve thinks what Hawkeye Barton said is right, one more person means one more hope. So he immediately contacted Falcon Sam. But it wasn't just Falcon Sam who came, he also brought Winter Soldier Bucky and a whole team of SHIELD logistics agents. Captain, Nick Frito gives you his regards on his behalf. Falcon descended from the sky and greeted. Captain, give the order. Captain America Steve nodded, passed Rory's information to everyone, and then ordered, Rory is most likely hiding around here. He can make weapons and explosives, so he's quite dangerous. Find him, and leave the rest to me. Okay, Captain. Roger that. The SHIELD agents split up. The Falcon rose into the air and released a drone, the Winter Soldier and Captain America conducted a ground search, and Hawkeye Barton climbed to the roof to monitor the streets. Captain, the headquarters channel has been connected. I will send you the satellite images later. The voice of War Machine Rhodes came from the headset. Captain America was just slightly stunned, then continued to search Rory. Rory was watching the surveillance footage at this moment. He put down his finished cup of water and said speechlessly, is it really necessary to make such a big fuss? Judging from the current situation, it is only a matter of time before we are discovered. It's time to make some necessary plans. The Avengers' temporary headquarters has been connected to satellite access, and quickly locked down the area where Rory might be hiding through surveillance. Captain America led everyone to check the locked areas one by one, trying to narrow the scope as much as possible. 2 days later, Rory, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, came out of a dentist's office and was captured by street surveillance cameras. Inside the Avengers' temporary headquarters, the body recognition monitoring system beeped. Rhodes immediately operated on the computer and then transmitted the image to Captain America's communicator. Captain, we've spotted Rory, heading south on the 41st block, wearing a black jacket and baseball cap. Roger that. Upon receiving the news, Captain America immediately led his men to Block 41 of Hell's Kitchen. Sam the Flying Falcon arrives first. Whoosh. Boom. Rory, who was walking on the road, was startled by a falcon that suddenly fell from the sky. Holding his heart, he said speechlessly, "Is this how all superheroes appear, or will the insurance company help you pay the claim if you scare ordinary people to death?" Sam, wearing red goggles, smiled slightly, "Just to scare the bad guys." "I'm a bad guy? What bad things have I done?" Rory tilted his head and blinked. Sam opened his mouth and realized that he didn't know what bad things Rory had done. He just thought that the people the captain wanted to catch were not good people. The captain will be here soon. You can tell him anything." In less than a minute, the street Rory was walking on was surrounded by several black SUVs, which looked like SHIELD style. Hawkeye Barton, Winter Soldier Bucky, Captain America, and others arrived one after another. Rory stood innocently on the sidewalk leaning against the wall. Seeing Captain America coming over, he said with a look of grievance, "Steve, is there some misunderstanding or do you think I did something bad?" Captain America is much taller than Rory. Page 8. After getting closer, he whispered, "Rory, hand over the things and come back with me." "What is it and where is it going back to?" Rory pretended to be ignorant and asked casually. "You know what you took. As for where you're going, of course you're going to where you're supposed to go." "Haha." Rory sneered and said, "Steve, you made me rediscover what a superhero is. You can do research as you please. You can research the cosmic cube to create weapons, use the serum to create Captain America, and research AI to create Ultron. Why can't I? It's because you represent justice, and anything you deem unacceptable is evil, right?" Rory's expression was full of sarcasm. Captain America Steve Rogers fell silent. It was true that the Avengers saved the universe, but that didn't mean that the Avengers had never made mistakes. Just as Rory was about to continue, Captain America suddenly stopped him, saying, "Enough, this is different. Thanos' blood is too dangerous. We can't take this risk. Don't talk about us, I'm not the same as you." Rory said this with a cold face and passed by Captain America, heading towards the laboratory, but was blocked by the Winter Soldier and Falcon. "You guys want my research results, right? Take them." Having been blocked, Rory glanced back at Captain America and said, "But what I want to say is, the only difference between you and the bandits is that you're wearing a cloak called justice." First of all, Rory did not commit any crime. He was just doing what any scholar would do, except that the things he got were more dangerous. But what kind of research is without risk? All weapons are created to kill. The serum can be used in the medical field and has not been judged as high risk by Captain America. Tony's mechanical prosthesis, Dr. Banner with green light, Ant-Man's expansion and contraction, and even the serum that strengthened Captain America also created the Red Skull who almost destroyed the world. To put it bluntly, Captain America is not afraid of the serum, but of Thanos. The disappeared Thanos has left an indelible shadow in his heart. Rory knew that it was useless to say this, so he led everyone to the laboratory with a cold face. "Those are the blood samples of Thanos that I cultivated. You can take them." Then he took a hard drive from the computer and said, "This is my scientific research. You can take it as well, but you must know that this thing does not belong to you." Rory handed the hard drive to Captain America. Captain America hesitated for a long time, then sighed and said, "Listen, Rory, I just want to eliminate the risk of instability. You know everything Thanos did, so I'm sorry." Then he pushed the hard drive back to Rory and continued, "This is your research result. I won't take it away. So, pretending to be a good guy doesn't mean you're sending me back to 1970. Rory had already guessed what Captain America was thinking. Captain America nodded helplessly and said, "Yes, you don't belong here." Chapter 9 Back to 1970, I dug Captain America's grave. Standing on the time machine, Rory looked at Captain America with a calm expression. Captain America, holding a box of raw stones in one hand and Thor's hammer in the other, stood opposite Rory and nodded to Dr. Banner in front of the console. "Dr. Banner, take us back." Dr. Banner nodded and began the countdown, and pressed the switch immediately after the countdown ended. "Call out." Captain America and Rory disappeared in an instant. Rory was blinded by the blue light of time travel, and when he opened his eyes again, he was back in a warehouse on the outskirts of Trenton in 1970. It was the dilapidated warehouse where he left. Captain America Steve Rogers stood in front of Rory, but without Thor's hammer in his hand. "It seems you have done a lot in the past few days." Captain America nodded, and he sent Thor's hammer and the original stone back to each timeline. Only the last space original stone was left in the box. "Rory, I hope you can live well here. I will visit you when I have time. While speaking, Steve took off the time-space bracelet on Rory's wrist. Oh. You're not planning to go back? Rory was still holding the computer hard drive that belonged to him. Captain America shrugged. I want to try the kind of life Tony talked about. Ha, I thought Captain America was a mindless patriot, but it turns out he has selfish motives as well. Rory said with a smile. Steve Rogers couldn't utter any rebuttal. He doesn't allow Rory to stay in the future, but he himself wants to stay in 1970. This is pure double standardism. Rory was too lazy to argue with Captain America anymore, so he just turned around and left. Before leaving, he waved and said, You don't need to tell me what kind of life you want to live, but I really hope that you will never appear in front of me again, never see me again. It would be a lie to say he wasn't angry, but he had no ability to resist. In front of all the superheroes, Rory was as fragile as a newborn baby. Captain America first returned the gemstone, and then while he was busy dating Peggy Carter, Rory had already taken a ride to New York. It's not that Rory has any special feelings for this place, it's just because it's prosperous enough that it's easier to get the experimental materials he needs. The first thing to do is to get money. Rory uses his knowledge of the future to attract investment, and the company that invests in him is Stark Group. Rory didn't meet Howard Stark, he just passed the review of Stark Group's strategic investment department. The funds were not much, but enough to support him to set up a laboratory of his own. Mr. Rory, this money is not given to you for free. Mr. Hans, the investment manager of Stark Group, hopes to see your research results within 3 months, otherwise we will take back this laboratory. Rory nodded and said, I will mail the research progress to Stark Group. Please don't disturb me while I'm doing my research. This is 1970, and even the slightest move from Rory would be enough to reach the limit of this level. It doesn't even take 3 months, he can produce a complete technology that is ahead of this era within 3 days. Oh Steve, I can't believe you're really back. I'm not dreaming. Peggy Carter excitedly pulled Captain America. The real touch told her that this was not a dream, but Carter couldn't believe it. How can I abandon the girl I love most? I still owe her a dance. Steve gently extended his hand to Peggy Carter's cheek. Warm, real, familiar touch and taste. A love that transcends time and space, in the senses of the two people, the air around them becomes much sweeter. Half a month passed in a flash. Steve, who spent every day in sweet love, suddenly thought of Rory. Peggy, I have something I need to take care of. I might be gone for a few days. After getting dressed, Peggy Carter turned around and asked, Is there anything I can help you with? It would be much easier for me if you were willing to help. It's not a big deal, just looking for someone. Of course, no problem. I'd love to help you. Peggy came over and kissed Steve on the cheek. Since its establishment in 45, SHIELD has achieved initial success. Although the intelligence has not reached the exaggerated level it did later, it is not difficult to find someone. A few hours later, Peggy got Rory's information. A lot of the information above is false, but the information about cooperating with Stark Group to build a laboratory is true. Steve was also surprised when he saw Rory's information. Has he reached a cooperation with Stark Group? Is there a problem? Peggy asked doubtfully, not understanding the truth. Steve was silent for a moment and then nodded, I really hope my worries are unnecessary. Peggy seemed to realize the seriousness of the matter and immediately drove Steve to the laboratory address recorded in the file. Banging. After breaking open the door of the laboratory, the room was empty and there was not even any experimental equipment. It was just an ordinary empty room. Of course Rory would not leave his real address. After getting the money, he directly moved to another place to build a laboratory to prevent Steve from coming. And Rory was not in New York at the moment. He had already boarded a research vessel bound for the Arctic, ready to see the frozen American butt. Sir, are you sure this is the right direction? Few people go to places like that. The hired captain came to the cabin to find Rory. Rory nodded firmly. Just follow the direction I marked. Scientific expeditions must of course be conducted in places where few people have gone before. When Rory went to the future, he saw a map of rescuing the frozen Captain America at the Avengers base, and he believed that he was not mistaken. However, the terrain will change over time. Rory cannot guarantee that he can find it, but he must at least try. A few days later, the research vessel finally stopped. With the help of a group of sailors, a car, and some daily necessities were carried off the ship. Rory drove alone towards the coordinates of the frozen Captain America. Covered in white snow and accompanied by strong winds, Rory drove in the snow for 2 days and 2 nights, and finally arrived at the precise coordinates of the frozen Captain America. It should be around here. May the God of wealth bless you, put your hands together. We parked the car and set up camp, boiled a pot of hot water, ate some instant food to replenish our energy, and then took a nap in the tent. After waking up, he started looking for Captain America. Narrow the search area based on the terrain, and then use a detector to search carefully. In just 2 days, Luo Rufeng's lips dried out, his skin became dry and pale, and 2 deep dark circles appeared on his face. But in order to get the blood sample of the frozen Captain America, Rory refused to give up. Just when he was about to give up, the detector finally responded. Beep beep beep. Luo Rui swung his ice pick and dug a few times. Ding. The sound of metal knocking was so beautiful to Rory's ears. Chapter 10. Hello Steve, I didn't expect we'd meet again, hee. Chapter 10. Steve never gives up. It was half a month later that Rory returned to New York. After leaving a dentist's office, I returned to the South Harbor Pier in downtown Manhattan with my newly replaced teeth. The laboratory is located in an abandoned rubber factory near the dock. After the factory went bankrupt, it was reclaimed by the bank and left idle. After Luo Rui came here, he rented one of the factory buildings to use as a laboratory. After closing the laboratory door, Luo Rui put on his white coat, hat, mask, and goggles. He walked to the test bench and carefully took out the replaced tooth. There were several capsules hidden inside the tooth, and the capsules contained blood samples of Thanos and Jessica Jones. That's right, he used this method to smuggle blood samples from the future to this era. Including Captain America's blood sample from the frozen one, 3 different blood samples were put into the container to start recultivating the cloned blood samples. Due to the lack of computing power and cutting-edge analysis instruments, Luo Rui's research progress became very slow. With Captain America's and Jessica Jones's blood samples for research, after countless trial and error, Rory finally developed a relatively mild serum sample. This serum is not the fusion of Captain America and Jessica Jones's serum, but the pure Thanos serum. The blood samples of Captain America and Jessica Jones only serve to assist in the research and reduce the strength of Thanos serum. What Rory wants is the pure bloodline of the Eternals, not some monster bloodline that is a mess of fusion. The current serum sample cannot be used directly and requires more sophisticated genetic programming. This step simply opens the door to creating Thanos bloodline enhancement potion. However, now that the door has been opened, it is only a matter of time before the real strengthening potion is completed. Peggy Carter brings Steve Rogers to Stark Corporation headquarters. Hello, I have an appointment with Howard Stark. After checking the information, the assistant took the 2 people into the elevator. When they arrived at Howard's laboratory, Howard Stark was busy doing research with his head down. He subconsciously raised his head when he heard Peggy cough. Oh Peggy, long time no see. Howard walked over and was about to give Peggy a warm hug, but he suddenly froze when he saw Steve Rogers beside Peggy out of the corner of his eye. You are Steve? Hi, long time no see. Steve Rogers raised his hand and greeted. Howard Stark said in disbelief, Oh, I can't believe you're still alive. Steve smiled bitterly and shook his head. Actually, I didn't expect that I would still be alive. After being frozen for 70 years, when he woke up, everything had changed and the familiar people had passed away one after another. After experiencing one war after another, he returned to the time point he accidentally missed. Everything is so bizarre. How did you? Howard Stark wanted to ask him how he survived and where he had been all these years. Steve Rogers intentionally changed the subject and interrupted, This is a long story. I came here today to ask for your help on another matter. Steve, the war is over. What you should do now is enjoy life. Howard looked at Peggy and teased. Peggy calmly hugged Steve and replied with a smile, I think you should put down your research and go home to pay attention to your wife, because you are going to be a father soon. Steve Rogers felt as if he were in another world. It seems like just yesterday I was fighting alongside Tony Stark, but today I heard the news that Tony Stark was about to be born. A strong sense of separation reminded Steve that he did not belong to this world. You're right. Well, let me hear what kind of help you need. Howard took off his goggles and gloves, walked to the coffee table, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed them to Captain America and Peggy Carter, and waited for the other to speak. Steve Rogers couldn't wait to say, Stark Group invested in a man named Rory, but I can't find him, so I want to use the name of Stark Company to ask him out for a meeting. Howard stared and spread his hands and asked, Is it just a small matter? It may seem trivial to you, but it's very important to me. There's a huge risk involved with this man named Rory. Steve Rogers also hoped that he was overthinking it, but when he thought about it, he always felt that something seemed wrong. In order to confirm that there would be no problem with Rory, Steve Rogers felt it necessary to confirm it himself. Howard turned and glanced at Peggy Carter. After Peggy nodded, she smiled and said, Okay, since you're the captain, I'll take care of this. Howard Stark is also one of the founders of SHIELD. Although he doesn't understand why Steve Rogers is looking for that person, since Peggy nodded, she must have her reasons. Howard Stark immediately contacted the investment department to send Rory's investment file. After receiving the file, he read it while saying, Rory was researching biochemistry and accidentally discovered a drug that could treat mental illness. He also obtained the procedures for clinical trials through the Stark Group. You can read it for yourself. Steve and Peggy Carter watched it together. I didn't find any problems when I watched it for the first time, and even Steve thought he was overthinking it. When Steve looked at it again, he seemed to find something wrong. Howard, is the completion time of the experiment recorded here correct? Howard glanced at it and nodded. That's right. The first phase of the experiment is expected to complete in 3 months. Stark Group will inject secondary investment funds based on the experimental data. Any questions? Yes, there is a big problem. If Luo wants to make this medicine, it won't take 3 months. Maybe only 3 days. How is that possible? Are you kidding me? Howard said it was impossible. Howard himself is a scientist, and doing experimental research requires a lot of time and energy, which is by no means as simple as Steve Rogers said. Steve didn't want to expose the fact that he traveled through time and space, and he had no way to explain that Rory was from the future timeline. Luo is a researcher himself. If he really came from a certain time point in the future, it would be easy for him to create a drug that is about 10 years more advanced than the current one. But Luo didn't do that. Instead, he set up a laboratory under the name of research. This couldn't help but make Steve doubt in his heart. Steve said with a serious expression, Howard, you have to believe me, this person is not as simple as you think. At this time, Luo was doing live experiments. With a syringe in one hand and a white mouse in the other, he put the mouse back into the tempered glass box after the injection was completed. He locked the lid, opened the video recorder, and focused on observing the changes in the mouse's body. Squeak squeak. The little white mouse walked around freely in the tempered glass box, sniffing from time to time with its little nose. About 20 seconds later, the little white mouse suddenly became irritable and bumped around in the tempered glass box. There seemed to be no sense of pain, or the pain was beyond the body's tolerance, and the tempered glass box continued to clang. It's not a rejection reaction, but it's unusually irritable. Just as Luo was puzzled, the fur on the little white mouse began to fall off in large pieces, and it became bald in a few seconds. The gene sequence has been altered. The little white mouse that was running around suddenly stopped, twitched twice and stopped breathing instantly. It looks like it's dead, but the changes in the body haven't stopped. The breathless mouse fell inside and did not move, but its muscles showed fibrosis and swelling. The body has been strengthened, but the organs can't withstand such strengthening, or is it because there is not enough energy? P.S. The contract signing has been completed, you can invest with confidence. Chapter 11 Deathly Haunted Steve and his powerful girlfriend. The 7th live experiment begins. Reduce serum activity, convert bioelectricity to stimulate cell regeneration, and inject nutrients and serum simultaneously. Begin the injection. After the injection of serum and nutrients was completed, Luo immediately turned on the power switch. The motor made a buzzing sound, and a large current passed through the converter and turned into very weak bioelectricity, stimulating the little white mouse in the box. Squeak squeak. The little white mouse kept screaming. The louder she shouted, the more excited Luo became. It's not that he has any BT fetish, but because the white mouse can make sounds, it means it is still alive. The previous experiments all ended in the death of the white mouse. If one of them survives, it means his experiment has made great progress. Squeak. Banging. The iron box that held the mouse suddenly burst, and a mouse bigger than a cat lay gasping for breath in the tempered glass tank. The little white mouse was not dead, but was lying half dead on the glass, gasping for breath. The red eyes seemed to be looking at Luo, and there was a fierce look in them. Depend on. What Luo feared most was that he would discover some kind of monster, so he made preparations for this in advance and immediately pressed a red button. The humming sound of the machine was heard, and several steel plates began to slowly close, ready to trap the little white mouse inside. Boom. Page 10. Boom. Boom. Just as the iron plate was about to close, the little white mouse suddenly climbed up and violently hit the tempered glass. Click. A crack appeared on the tempered glass, which scared Luo. Crash. Fortunately, at the last moment before the glass shattered, the steel plates closed tightly together, and the little white mouse that wanted to escape hit its head on the steel plates. Perhaps because it used too much force, the little white mouse knocked itself unconscious. While the mouse was unconscious, Luo took out a vibranium needle and drew a blood sample from the mouse. Part of it was put into test tubes and refrigerated, and the rest was taken under a microscope for observation and research. I recorded the data and had a full meal. Then he packed up and left the laboratory with a briefcase. These days are the time for him to renew his contract with Stark Investment Department. In the briefcase are samples of antidepressant psychiatric drugs that he prepared in advance. It's not a great invention, but it's no problem for Stark Group to make a fortune. Take a taxi to the Stark Group headquarters building, and explain your purpose to the front desk after entering. In less than 3 minutes, the investment manager who was in contact with him at the time came running down in a hurry. Damn it, you cheated me. Not only do I want all my investment back, I'm also going to sue you. You damn liar. The investment manager cursed under his breath. Rory calmly raised his briefcase and said, the latest drug has been successfully developed. As long as it can pass clinical trials, you, me, and Stark Group will become richer. What are you lying about? Your research was successful? The investment manager asked in disbelief. I've been to your lab, and it's empty. How did you? Rory shrugged. The conditions there are not good, and the space is small. I just moved to a new place and forgot to inform you. There's no need to get so angry. Ahem. You're right. Next, let's take a look at your research results. The investment manager's expression changed faster than turning the pages of a book. The investment manager first arranged for his assistant to invite Rory to the office. He himself ran to the leader's office to report the situation. 10 minutes later, Captain America at Peggy Carter's residence received the news that Rory had appeared. When Captain America arrived, Rory was reporting the efficacy and development costs of antidepressants to the investment manager of Stark Group's investment department. Sir, this is the data I collected recently. More than 100 people out of every 1,000 in the United States need antidepressants. The following are common antidepressants currently on the market, and almost all of them have certain side effects, such as obesity, sexual dysfunction, gastrointestinal discomfort, drowsiness or insomnia, etc. And the side effects of this drug are minimal, even negligible. Bang. Just as Rory was talking, Steve Rogers suddenly rushed in. Steve was followed by Peggy Carter and Howard Stark. The investment manager stood up immediately when he saw the big boss Howard. Howard just waved his hand casually. The investment manager left the office like a good boy and even closed the office door considerately. Pata. Rory threw the pen in his hand onto the desk and said speechlessly, Steve, why do you always haunt me? Now that you're back, you should focus more on Miss Peggy instead of following me around like a scabby dog. Before Steve Rogers could speak, Peggy Carter asked, do you know me? Rory shrugged, of course, Agent Carter, one of the founders of the SSR department and Captain America Steve Rogers' first love. Shut up, don't say any more. Steve was worried that if Rory continued, he might reveal the matter of time travel, so he quickly interrupted him. Rory leaned back against the desk with his arms folded over his shoulders, looking at Steve calmly. Steve stated his intention directly, Rory, what have you been busy with recently? Steve has absolute justice in his heart, of course, more people think he is still a saintly. Sacrificing the interests of a small number of people for the benefit of the majority is typical American individualism. He doesn't consider why bad people become bad people. He only knows that since you have become a bad person, I must kill you. Rory chuckled, excuse me, who are you? Why should I tell you? Peggy stepped forward and said, since you know I'm an SSR agent, you should also know that I have this right. Steve is employed by the SSR from now on, and he has the right to conduct an investigation into you personally. What is power? This is called power. The rules can be changed anytime and anywhere, and the power of the state can be used to target individuals. If you are an ordinary person, how can you resist when you have no ability to change? Just like a normal person cannot prove that he or she is not mentally ill, whether you are mentally ill or not is not your own decision, only the doctor's decision can make it. Rory took a deep breath, turned around, patted the briefcase, and said, you can see it all. If you want to live a more comfortable life, you need more money. I'm making money. Do you have any questions? Steve couldn't understand the technical terms on the document, but he didn't think so in his heart. Rory, I know you're very smart in certain areas. You can make gadgets anytime, anywhere if you want, but you didn't. Instead, it took you 3 months to come up with this thing. And as far as I know, you even went out to sea once during those 3 months. Steve, that's enough. Rory's face darkened instantly, and he said coldly, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to immediately produce all the technology that's beyond this era before you'll be at ease? Or do you want me to come up with some very advanced technology and then jump out from the moral high ground and accuse me of changing the world? No. Don't be so excited, listen to me. Steve knew at this time that he had said the wrong thing. He was just making a wishful guess and had no evidence. But in Rory's opinion, Steve just wanted to push him into a desperate situation. Chapter 12, Old Lady Steve Has a Heart of Love. Rory and Steve had a heated argument. Peggy Carter was curious about why Steve was so familiar with Rory, but Howard Stark on the other side heard something else. Hey, hey, hey. Wait a minute, both of you. What were you just talking about? Technology that's beyond our time. Steve was startled, and immediately said, "Excuse me, Howard, and Peggy, I want to talk to him alone, is that okay?" Out of respect and trust for Captain America, Peggy Carter and Howard, although they had 1,000 questions in their minds, still gave space to Steve and Rory. After Peggy and Howard left, Steve closed the door tightly. Turning back, he asked, "Rory, I don't want you to do any dangerous experiments. People are like this. When you talk to them about reason, they talk to you about strength and use their special authority to suppress you. When you break the rules, they talk to you about reason again. In fact, such a person understands everything. He just habitually stands on the side of self-interest, rather than absolute justice and fairness." Rory had given up on preaching and simply asked, "Steve, honestly, what do you want to do? Do I need your consent for everything I do?" "Of course not, but I have to fulfill my duty to supervise you." Steve doesn't understand the working mechanism of time travel. He just subconsciously thinks that it is wrong to change history and history should proceed as before. But they completely forget that they are also a part of history. Luo laughed sarcastically. "According to you, I should be an ordinary person, right? I'm curious, when Dr. Erkins created you, did you consider these issues? Dr. Erkins also created the Red Skull, who nearly destroyed the world, but his cause was touted as a just cause." Luo closed the briefcase and held it in his hand. "Okay, that's it," he said. "Whatever you want to do is up to you, and I have no obligation to explain it to you. If you think I'm a bad person, then find evidence of my bad behavior. If you think I'm a good person, then please don't bother me again. I'll really thank you." He walked around Steve, opened the office door, and glanced at Peggy Carter and Howard standing outside. Then he said to Howard Stark, "Mr. Howard Stark, I will find other investment companies to cooperate with for this drug. Please give me some time. I will return the investment of Stark Group to you. As for the cooperation, let's end it here." After Rory left, Peggy came into the house, patted Steve on the shoulder, and comforted him, "Don't think too much. I'll arrange for someone to help you keep an eye on him. As long as the situation is not right, we can arrest him at any time." "I'm fine, and thank you, Peggy." Rory walked out of the Stark headquarters building and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Steve really had no intention of letting him go. He himself is a beneficiary of the super serum, but he does not allow others to develop super serum. Luo said that he is very dissatisfied with Sisterly. Fortunately, this is the Big Apple, and there is no shortage of speculative capital. With research results in hand, you don't have to worry about not being able to sell them. Luo spent the whole day visiting several major investment banks, but all the responses he received told him to go home and wait for news. It wasn't until dark that we returned to Nangang Pier in the downtown area. Banging. When Luo pushed open the door of the laboratory, he was stunned. What? The laboratory seemed to have been robbed. It was in a mess, with all kinds of test tubes and flasks broken on the floor. There was a hole in the steel box containing the mice, and the mice inside had long disappeared. Broken. When Luo got closer, he found that behind the laboratory table lay the corpse of a huge and obviously disfigured rat. Wearing gloves, he carried the mouse carcass to the laboratory bench for examination. The mouse's incisors had fallen out, replaced by a mouthful of sharp, pointed teeth. No wonder it could bite through the iron plate that imprisoned it. The white fluff turned into a dull gray, and each fine hair became extremely hard. There are also claws as sharp as knives, which just match the scratches on the steel plate. The physical features have changed significantly, the genetic sequence has been tampered with, and there is suspicion of distortion. The cause of death is one of two factors: 1. Insufficient energy. After escaping the steel box, he lost all his energy and died of starvation. 2. Genetic abnormalities caused a rejection reaction, exceeding the organ's endurance limit, resulting in a sudden death. Luo then conducted blood tests on the deformed mice. The result confirmed Luo's previous guess. The inability to correctly carry genetic genes leads to gene sequence distortion, which poses obvious uncontrollable risks. After the test, Luo put on protective clothing and a protective mask, and cleaned up the mess in the laboratory bit by bit. Luo's eyes froze for a moment as he picked up a broken flask. There was still some liquid left in the broken flask, and Luo's first impression of this liquid was that it had vitality. Page 11. The liquid emits a light blue light, and the twinkling stars seem to contain the entire universe. The light flickered, as if it were breathing. Luo carefully put the liquid into the test tube, then used an extractor to take out a little bit and drip it onto the slide. There was no time to clean up the garbage on the floor, so he immediately sat down in front of the microscope to observe. Damn it! It's really a ghost. Oh, it's amazing. This is indeed a serum made from Thanos' blood sample. Perhaps when the mouse overturned the experimental table, some neutralizing substances were mixed in, causing the genetic code to be accidentally cracked. If Thanos' chromosomes are a safe, then the genetic code is the key to open the safe, which contains Thanos' powerful super genes. Now that the safe has been accidentally opened, Thanos' powerful super gene has been exposed to Rory, and he can program it however he wants. After reaching the conclusion, Rory was so excited that he immediately devoted himself to the experiment. The door of the safe has been opened. What Rory has to do is to extract Thanos' gene from the safe, and then put this gene into Rory's chromosome to develop a new growth factor. This factor is covered with the appearance of Rory's chromosomes, but it contains Thanos' genes. This way, it can be perfectly integrated into Rory's body. The only drawback is that Rory can no longer replicate this mutant serum. Because there are at least hundreds of experimental materials on the experimental table, Rory is unable to perfectly restore the specific type or types of fusion that resulted in the mutation. Fortunately, this serum is enough for one dose, and there is even some left over for another live experiment. Rory worked all night, and the serum was finally ready at dawn. Looking at the serum that no longer glowed, Rory's heart was filled with a sense of accomplishment. This may be the last live experiment, let's get started. Rory took out another little white mouse, installed a new safety device and started the experiment immediately. Chapter 13, Justice on the tip of the tongue is the most annoying. Peggy Carter and Steve Rogers walk side by side. After a moment of silence, she asked the question in her heart, Steve, I think you have a lot to tell me. Steve rubbed his brows with a headache. Peggy, this is a bit difficult to explain. It doesn't matter, I have plenty of time. Well, Steve said after a brief thought, you could assume that the young man named Rory is conducting a very dangerous experiment, but I have no evidence, and I don't know if he's brought anything more dangerous. Who is Rory? Why is there no information about him in the database? Peggy Carter had many doubts in her mind, but she was more willing to believe Steve Rogers. Well, actually, I don't know much about his background. I just know that he's very dangerous. Steve also didn't know Rory's background. Rory suddenly appeared in front of him and Tony Stark, and then took him to the future, did some dangerous things, and was sent back here. To be honest, Steve is very regretful now. It would have been more reassuring to leave Rory in the future and entrust him to the care of the Avengers. Since you think he's dangerous, then arrest him first. Although Peggy Carter was confused, she trusted Steve's judgment. When he was about to contact his subordinates to arrest Rory, the lights in the house suddenly went out. Puzzled, I pressed the switch twice, but still found no response. Why is the power out? Steve walked over, took a look, and said, I'll go check the wiring. After a while, the two finally discovered the problem. It was not just a power outage at home, but the entire city was out of power. Peggy Carter immediately opened the cabinet door and started the independent power generation device, then immediately called SSR headquarters. There's a power outage in downtown Manhattan. Check what's going on immediately. A few minutes later the call came back. Sir, I just received a response from the power company. There's a power outage at South Harbor Terminal in Lower Manhattan. They're sending someone over to inspect it? Peggy Carter and Steve were both stunned, because the last time this happened was when Steve received serum enhancement. Oh no. Is it Rory? Peggy Carter immediately arranged for people to go to Southport Pier to carry out a complete blockade. Then the two of them put on their clothes, rushed out of the house, and drove quickly to Southport Pier. Just as Peggy Carter was about to arrest Rory, Rory had already completed his last live experiment on mice. Compared to the violent little white mouse before, this one is obviously much more docile. Although the body shape has changed, it has only become a little bigger and still looks very cute. The overall change is very stable. Okay, it's my turn next. Rory is very confident in the serum. There are only two possible outcomes. One is that the body will be strengthened by integrating Thanos genes, and the other is that there will be no changes at all. There will be no third outcome. After debugging the equipment, Rory took off his clothes and shoes and walked to the simple energy cabin. He held up the serum syringe and smiled at the mouse in the tempered glass box, wish me good luck. Then, without hesitation, the serum was injected into the body through the carotid artery. The electricity conversion bioenergy supply cabin started working, and the lines that had just been repaired by the power company were once again all concentrated on a factory building in Nangang Wharf. The high voltage line was connected to the transformer, and flames suddenly appeared. Just at this moment, Peggy Carter drove Steve Rogers to Southport Pier. Where do you think he's hiding? Peggy Carter put her hands on her waist and looked around the dock. The SSR agents who arrived earlier are conducting a comprehensive search of the dock. Steve shook his head. I don't know, let's go down and take a look first. The two entered the dock, and as they were walking, a wire above their head suddenly exploded with a bang, and sparks flew, scaring Peggy all over. The broken line swept towards Peggy Carter, and Steve immediately picked up Peggy Carter and dodged. Then Steve Rogers looked forward along the line and saw a faint blue light coming out of an abandoned factory in the distance. He's over there. Quick. Steve Rogers ran as fast as he could, and Peggy Carter behind him couldn't catch up at all. She could only run forward while contacting for support. Ah! As soon as he arrived at the factory door, Steve heard Rory's screams coming from inside. He kicked the iron gate with all his strength. Banging. Banging. After several consecutive hits, Steve finally knocked the iron door down. Entering the factory, there were densely packed wires on the ground, a humming machine, and an energy cabin emitting blue light on the other side. Steve arrived too late. When he approached, the energy chamber had reached its peak and Rory's roar could no longer be heard from inside. As the blue light of the energy cabin gradually went out, Steve couldn't wait to rush over and capture Rory. Ka-ka-ka. Steve pried open the energy hatch with his bare hands, and a thick white smoke came out from inside, interfering with Steve's vision. Suddenly a foot kicked out from inside, so fast that Steve couldn't react at all. Bang. Steve's entire body flew backward like a cannonball, and after flying 7 or 8 meters, he landed heavily on the ground and slid for another 2 or 3 meters before stopping. Steve. Peggy Carter immediately rushed over and helped Steve up. After getting up, Steve stared at the energy cabin. A few seconds later, Rory came out in his underwear and asked gloomily, Steve, why do you always pester me? Rory, I'm doing this for your own good. I don't want you to go further down the wrong path. How do you know it's wrong? Why don't you question whether Erkins was wrong in making you? Now you stand here and speak so shamelessly. Is this the justice you claim to be? Rory said as he walked forward, and when he finished he was right in front of Steve. He pointed his finger at Steve's nose and roared. Steve, you're just a soldier, not a scientist. I am. This is my experiment, you have no right to participate. No, I must stop you. Bang. Rory's feet pressed against Steve's abdomen, and Steve flew out again, hitting the wall with a loud bang, shaking off a layer of dust. Who do you think you are? You keep shouting about freedom, but what right do you have to restrict my freedom? Rory suddenly rushed towards Steve, grabbed Steve's neck and said sarcastically, I understand. It's because you're a superhero, not because you're so righteous. You just want to maintain your righteous image, right? Nonsense. Boom. Captain America fought back, knocking Rory away with a knee strike, then delivering a powerful punch to the right side of Rory's jaw. Chapter 14, Prejudice in People's Hearts is Like a Mountain. Rory rubbed his chin and didn't feel much pain. Then he smiled, a very casual smile. Steve, do you remember that line, you think you're fighting for us? You're only fighting for yourself. Who can avenge those civilians who died? Steve was stunned when he heard this. Superheroes create trouble, then eliminate it, and finally reap the attention and applause of the public. But what about ordinary people? What do they gain? Shock, fear, loss of property and even family members. Isn't this ironic? Steve clenched his fists and said seriously, where there's war, there's sacrifice. All we can do is help more people in need. Oh. Really? Rory laughed. So I'm the one who can be sacrificed? You're such a hypocrite. Steve remained silent, refusing to answer the question. Rory shook his head. First of all, I was just doing experimental research and didn't do anything bad. Yet, you assumed I was a bad person and tried to obstruct me in every way, even interrupting my experiment for no reason. Page 12. You don't know how much effort I put into this experiment. What I want to say is, if I really become a bad guy, it must be your contribution, Steve Rogers. Rory didn't know whether Steve's mask of justice was real or fake, but he knew that Steve must have firmly believed that he was on the side of justice. Such complaints are almost meaningless. Rory doesn't want to change Steve's mind, nor can he change it. He just wants to vent his dissatisfaction. Steve stepped forward and said, there's no point in saying this now. You got what you wanted. All I can do is help you use your abilities correctly. Rory couldn't help but say, who the hell do you think you are? I call you Captain. Do you really think you are the embodiment of justice? Come back with me. It will be good for both you and me. I don't want to attack you. Steve Rogers always spoke in a righteous manner. Rory chuckled, you don't want to, but I do. Although the experiment was forced to be interrupted, Rory still received corresponding enhancements. He is now even half a head taller than Steve. His muscles are taut and his body is full of explosive power, but he is not as muscular as Captain America. He now really wants to try out what level he is at. Call out. Rory moved very quickly, and Captain America was no slow either. He narrowly avoided a punch from Rory in the face, dodged sideways, and at the same time, he hooked Rory's left rib with his right hand. Snapped. The punch didn't hit, but was blocked by Rory. Rory has not learned any fighting skills, but he seems to have a natural fighting instinct in his body. This instinct does not belong to him, but to Thanos. The fact that this punch was blocked was beyond Steve's expectation. He attacked again, throwing 3 consecutive punches and 1 kick, but all of them were dodged or blocked by Rory. Rory's strength and speed surpass Steve in almost all aspects, and he also has Thanos' super fighting instincts. But Steve beat him to a 50-50 draw. Sure enough. Rory didn't feel any pressure, but Steve became more and more frightened as the battle went on. In Steve's eyes, Rory's fighting skills improved rapidly. From being able to deal with things easily at the beginning to being able to barely hold on now, it only took 3 or 2 minutes in total. He even had the illusion that he was fighting Thanos alone. I couldn't help but ask loudly, "Rory, where did your serum come from? Is it Thanos?" "Guess what?" Rory laughed. With the help of his fighting instinct, Rory fought more and more smoothly, and he even became addicted to the fun of fighting. Bang. Without the shield, Steve's combat power was reduced by at least 30%. He could hardly cause any harm to Rory with his fists and kicks. At most, he would just cause a little pain. So the shield is what Captain America needs to force a 50-50 split? Rory went from being cautious at the beginning to being more aggressive now, fighting with all his might, almost hitting every punch. Boom. A quick punch landed directly on Steve's face. Steve flew backwards with his head tilted back, a streak of blood spurting from his nose and the corners of his mouth. Rory didn't press his advantage. He stood there, looking at the powerful fist, and laughed. "Steve, you know, I originally wanted to be a superhero like you guys, but after this period of contact, I found that it's better not to be a superhero." Steve wiped the blood from his lips and struggled for a long time before standing up from the ground. "I could spend the whole day with you." This sentence seemed to have a buff bonus, and Steve would get some help every time he said it. This time is no exception. Bang. A bullet hit Rory's feet. Peggy Carter stood not far away, holding a gun and shouting, "Stand still, or the next shot will blow your head off." If it were Thanos, he wouldn't be afraid of a nuclear bomb, let alone a pistol. If Thanos is compared to a super luxurious and finely decorated villa of over 1,000 square meters, then Rory's current situation can be considered as a small unfinished apartment of 45 square meters at most. The functions are the same, both are used for living, but the difference is huge. So Rory didn't know if he could handle it. "Peggy, grab him. Now is not the time to be a hero." Steve, without a shield, is no match for Rory. He needs Peggy Carter's help. The agents also rushed into the laboratory at this time and slowly surrounded Rory under Peggy Carter's orders. Rory sneered, looked at Steve, and said, "Old popsicle, you keep talking about freedom and justice all day long, and when you wake up you act like you represent the moral ceiling of humanity. You're the only 5-star Madonna in the entire universe. I hope you remember everything that happened today, because you'll be responsible for everything that happens afterward. They shout for justice but do things that go against the principles of justice, they shout for freedom but want to restrict the freedom of others." After hearing these words, Steve's face was as stinky as a sewer that hadn't been cleaned in 50 years. Just when he wanted to say something in rebuttal, Rory suddenly took off running, as fast as a supercar. When passing by the workbench, press a switch. Then there was a loud bang, and Rory knocked a hole in the wall, jumped out, and plunged into the Hudson River. By the time Steve reached the shore, he had already lost sight of Rory. Peggy Carter pulled out her intercom and ordered, "Call the Coast Guard to search the coast, and notify the New York headquarters to issue a citywide wanted notice for Rory." After making all the arrangements, Peggy Carter came to Steve, who was standing on the shore in a daze, and said, "Steve, can you tell me about him?" Peggy Carter had just begun to speak when an explosion occurred behind her. Boom boom. A thick black smoke rose into the sky, and the factory that served as a laboratory was instantly reduced to ruins. Steve turned his head and stared at the blazing ruins. He sighed and said, "He destroyed all the experimental data. How smart. I'll have someone investigate carefully, hoping to find some useful information." The fire was quickly brought under control after the fire was arrived. At the same time, all the blood samples in the laboratory were flushed clean. Apart from some broken test vessels and scrap metal, SSR was unable to obtain any experimental data from it. P.S. guys, please vote and give us a thumbs up. I beg you. Chapter 15. You want war, I will give you war. Steve, we should go back, and I think we really need to talk. Peggy Carter drove the Jeep next to Steve and beckoned him to get in. Steve got into the car in silence. The hardest part for Steve was how he was going to explain what had happened to Peggy Carter. As soon as the Jeep left Nangang Wharf, Rory slowly poked his head out from the water on the shore, went ashore and followed the Jeep. Peggy Carter took Steve back through downtown to their home in Midtown. He opened the door to his apartment, put down his keys, took off his coat, poured 2 cups of coffee and went to the sofa. Peggy handed one of the cups to Steve and said, "Steve, you weren't like this before. I think you owe me an explanation." Steve held the coffee cup in both hands, lowered his head and remained silent. Peggy sat down next to Steve, put a hand on Steve's leg and whispered soothingly, "Hey, we trust each other, you can tell me anything." Steve shook his head. "No, I just don't know how to say it." "It's okay, we have plenty of time, you can talk as long as you want." Neither Peggy nor Steve knew that at this moment there was a person lying on the wall outside the apartment window. Yes, it was Rory. Of course, Rory doesn't have Spider-Man's abilities, but he can dig his fingers into the wall, which is not a difficult task for him now. Inside the house, Steve got up and walked to a cabinet, opened the door and took out a box from under the partition. I went back to the sofa and opened the box, which contained 2 time-space shuttle bracelets. Peggy picked up one of them curiously, looked at the time-space bracelet that looked so high-tech, and asked, "What is this?" "This thing is called a space-time positioning bracelet." "Space-time positioning? Do you mean time travel?" Peggy looked at Steve in shock. Steve nodded and said, "Yes, it's what you think." My God. Peggy Carter is not stupid, or rather, she is very smart. The SSR, Strategic Scientific Corps, organization has collected many unidentified items codenamed 084. She had seen many things that science could not explain, but the theory of time travel, which only existed on paper, was still too advanced for her. This is incredible. Peggy Carter thought of countless reasons, but this was the only one she hadn't thought of. Steve raised his head and said sadly, "Peggy, I'm sorry I lied to you, but I..." "No, Steve, you're still the same Steve I know, right?" Steve nodded sincerely. Peggy Carter smiled slightly, "For me, as long as you are still you, that's enough." Having said that, the two couldn't help but kiss each other. Rory, who was standing outside the window, couldn't help but shudder when he heard the disgusting words, "Bah, shameless." After adjusting his body slightly, he suddenly broke into the room through the window. As soon as Steve stood up from the sofa, he was knocked away by Rory's punch. Page 13. Peggy Carter was quick to move, reaching out to draw her gun, but Rory grabbed her long neck. "Rory, don't mess around." With Peggy Carter in his hand, Steve didn't dare to act rashly and raised his hands to signal Rory to calm down. Rory slowly lifted Peggy Carter into the air, then hooked his finger at Steve, "Be good and give that to me." "Okay. No problem, put Peggy down first." "Calm down, we can talk it over. There's no need to go this far." Steve immediately raised the space-time bracelet and said a bunch of nonsense to comfort Rory. Rory said speechlessly, "Shut up, I don't want to hear any nonsense, give me the bracelet." Steve was smart. He had 2 bracelets on his hand, but he only gave one to Rory. The bracelet drew an arc in the air and was caught steadily in Rory's hand. He took a casual look at it and confirmed that it was the one he was wearing. After nodding with satisfaction, he smiled playfully and said, "Steve, we could have been friends, but I'm really annoyed by your condescending attitude and your constant lectures on me." Peggy was lifted up in the air, gasping for breath, her face flushed red. Just when she was about to faint, Rory threw her to Steve and quickly jumped out the window to escape. Steve wanted to catch up immediately, but he couldn't let go of Peggy. He held Peggy and pinched her philtrum for 2 seconds. Peggy, who had slowly regained consciousness, said with difficulty, "Steve, don't worry about me. Go chase her. Go chase her." Steve gritted his teeth and stomped his feet, then immediately jumped out of the window after putting Carter down. After landing steadily at the bottom and looking around, he didn't see Rory's shadow, so he could only randomly choose a direction to chase. On the rooftop of the apartment building, Rory, holding the bracelet, looked at Steve walking away and laughed. Captain Wu Wu Kai is good in every way except that he lacks wisdom. An hour later, Rory walked to Central Park and dug out a metal box with his bare hands from under a tree in the park. The box contained various blood samples, serums, and backup research results. Every Chinese person understands the principle that a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. Ever since he met Steve in the Stark Group headquarters building, he guessed that Steve would not let him go easily, so Rory prepared another escape route for himself in advance. Hoo-hoo, hoo-hoo. Swish. The sound of a propeller came above Rory's head, and then a beam of light hit Rory. Bang. As Rory looked up, a dark figure jumped out of the helicopter. "Rory, you're not going anywhere without the PIM particles. Give me the stuff and come back with me." Rory looked at Steve, who had descended from the helicopter, and asked with a smile, "Are you sure?" Steve was very sure before, but when he saw Rory take out half a bottle of PIM particles from somewhere, his mind was completely confused. "What are you doing? You may have been frozen for too long and your brain is not working well. Let me remind you, this is the first time you go to the future from 1970. Rory activated the space-time bracelet and put half a bottle of PIM particles into it. Steve suddenly remembered that it was Rory's first time traveling, so he only used half a bottle. The space-time bracelet and PIM particles still need the cooperation of machines to enter the quantum field. It just so happens that Dr. Bruce Banner in the future activated the return switch. Steve voluntarily stayed here and did not use the time-space bracelet again, so the time-space bracelet is now activated. In other words, it was Steve who gave Rory the chance to travel through time again. With 2 taps on the space-time bracelet, a high-tech white space-time shuttle suit instantly appeared on Rory's body. Just at this moment, Peggy Carter and his men arrived. Rory glanced at Peggy Carter and said with a smile, "Steve, I don't know if you like to do good things with bad intentions, or if you are really stupid. You are just a soldier at most. You don't really think of yourself as a savior, do you? Since you want war, then I will give you war." A white light suddenly appeared. Rory's figure disappeared from everyone's sight the next second. Chapter 16. Hello, Village Chief, I need help. "Peggy, I'm sorry, I messed up this." "No, it's not your fault." Steve blamed himself. "I originally wanted to stay with you, but now I have messed up everything. Rory's problem is my fault, and I have to go and solve it." Peggy knew that Steve was leaving. Although she was reluctant, she was satisfied to see Steve one more time in her lifetime. "Go ahead and save the world just like you did last time, Peggy." Steve and Peggy Carter share a deep kiss. After the kiss, Steve put on the bracelet and put on the same white time-traveling suit as Rory. Peggy couldn't help but shout, "Steve, will we meet again?" "Yes, I will. I will wait for you in the future," Steve said firmly. The next second, Steve disappeared from Peggy Carter's sight just like Rory. Rustle, rustle. Puff. Just as Peggy Carter was about to leave, a small white head popped out from the ground. It was the little white mouse that Rory had successfully used in his last live experiment. The little white mouse that broke out of the ground came to the place where Rory disappeared and sniffed. It smelled Rory's scent, but did not see Rory's shadow. What was even stranger was that a look of human loss appeared in the mouse's eyes. Seeing this, Peggy Carter squatted down, reached out, and gently touched the little white mouse, and murmured, "Did he create you too?" The little white mouse smelled Rory's scent on Peggy Carter and immediately showed a sense of closeness. Peggy Carter smiled, then picked up the mouse and left Central Park. Steve and Rory disappeared. Maybe she could get some of the answers she wanted from this little white mouse. Call out. Rory returned to reality from the quantum realm again. He took off his time-traveling suit and walked out of the dark alley. After careful observation, he confirmed that this was indeed New York, but not the previous New York, but a more prosperous New York. "Hey, kid, hand over all the valuables you have." 2 men wearing hooded sweatshirts walked up to Rory and suddenly showed a shining dagger. Rory blinked and asked, "What year is it?" The 2 little black guys looked at each other, and then said angrily, "You little bastard, are you kidding me?" Snapped. Xiao Hiza didn't even see Rory make any movement before his neck appeared in the other's palm. With a little effort, Xiao Hiza was lifted into the air in front of Rory. Rory said seriously, "Answer my question, what year is it now?" "It's 2008. "I'm sorry, sir, please." Xiao Hiza had difficulty breathing and tried to pry Rory's hands free, but he couldn't move them. Struggling and begging for mercy, Rory murmured, "You're one of the Avengers?" and threw Hiza aside. The 2 little black guys fled away tumbling and crawling. Rory put on a hat, sunglasses, and a mask and disappeared into the crowd. Rory didn't know whether what happened to him in 1970 would affect the present. Moreover, at this time, SHIELD had completed its global layout with the support of the World Security Council and obtained powerful intelligence monitoring capabilities. He didn't want to be targeted by SHIELD as soon as he appeared. Rory figured out a lot of things in 3 days. The current Tony Stark is not Iron Man yet, and the current Captain America still only lives in legend. History has not changed at all. The next thing to do is to raise money and set up a new laboratory. Although the serum has been injected, the ability is far from what Rory expected. Not to mention reaching the invincible level of Thanos, but at least it has to be similar. Life goes on, and experiments never stop. 3 nights later, Rory walked out of the restaurant after finishing dinner. When he was about to cross the street, A convoy drove past him quickly. Qian Xian Yang. Just after cursing, the convoy suddenly stopped in front of a hotel not far from Luo Rui. There were a dozen bodyguards in black, looking very impressive. A tall, strong, and fat man got out of the car in the middle. "Hey village chief Jin." Luo Rui was just worried about where to make money, and now this opportunity has come. Wilson Fisk has a very important date tonight. Wilson Fisk understood the social law of the survival of the fittest since he was a child. Driven by this law, Wilson Fisk quickly became one of the most powerful gang leaders in New York. After reaching the summit, Wilson Fisk not only did not feel satisfied, but instead felt an unprecedented emptiness. Page 14. Until a woman named Vanessa walked into his world. Tonight is his first date with Vanessa. Vanessa is an oil painting merchant. She is not only beautiful, but also humorous and full of connotation. She deeply attracted Wilson Fisk, the gangster, when they first met. The date was only halfway through, and Wilson Fisk was chatting and laughing with Vanessa. The atmosphere was quite relaxed and happy, which was a feeling Wilson Fisk had not experienced in a long time. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned, and the date was interrupted by Russian gang members who suddenly broke in. This made Wilson Fisk very annoyed. After sending Vanessa home, Wilson Fisk decides to teach the guy who ruined his date a lesson he'll never forget. After dealing with the Russian gangster, Wilson Fisk returned to his cold home. After habitually stroking his cufflinks a few times and taking off his coat, he was about to take a shower when a voice suddenly came from the shadows. "Vanessa is beautiful, will you marry her, Kingpin?" "Who?" Wilson Fisk's whole body tensed up instantly, and he looked warily in the direction where the voice came from. A hand emerged from the shadows and flicked a switch on the wall. Snapped. All the lights in the house are on. Wilson Fisk frowned at the young Asian man in his 20s and asked, "Tell me why you are here. If you can't give me a reasonable explanation, you will never be able to leave this room again unless you become a corpse." Luo Rui smiled faintly, walked to the sofa and sat down, then said casually, "Don't be nervous, I'm here to discuss cooperation." Wilson Fisk was nervous not because Rory could show up at his house without a trace, but because Rory had just mentioned Vanessa. While looking at Luo Rui, he asked, "I don't remember any cooperation between us." Rory shrugged, "Not before, not now, but there will be after today." Wilson Fisk felt that this young man was crazy. If he could say the name Kingpin, one should know what he did, but now he could still sit there calmly and talk. He didn't understand what gave the young man such strong self-confidence. Luo Rui pointed to the sofa and said, "Why don't you sit down and talk?" Wilson Fisk didn't sit down, but came behind the sofa and stared at Rory. Luo Rui chuckled and then got straight to the point. "Let me introduce myself first. My name is Luo Rui, and I'm a scientist in the biological field. I need a laboratory right now, but I don't have the money. You, Mr. Kingpin, will fund the construction of the laboratory for me. In exchange, I can protect your safety, both your freedom and your life." After hearing what Rory said, the wariness on Wilson Fisk's face disappeared and turned into stunned shock. "You, kidding me?" Chapter 17 Call the police, your brain has been stolen. Wilson Fisk was convinced he had encountered a psychopath. The murderous gangster suddenly felt a sense of powerlessness in his heart. He waved his hand at Luo Rui and said, "Go away. I don't want to kill a mentally person with my own hands." Luo Rui scratched his head and said, "Are you calling a scientist? How dare you say such a thing? My brain would weigh 2 pounds more than yours if you dug it out. Believe it or not." Wilson Fisk shook his head, "I don't believe it, because normal people would never dig their brains out." "FK. You idiot." Wilson Fisk didn't get angry after being scolded, but reached out to pick up Rory and throw him out the door. As soon as he stretched out his hand, Wilson Fisk's expression immediately changed. From daze to surprise, from shock to bewilderment. Thump. The huge body knelt in front of Luo Rui. You. Wilson Fisk reached out to grab Rory, but Rory grabbed his wrist with his backhand. As a macho man with 90% muscle density in his body, and as a humanoid monster whose physical fitness almost reached the limit of human physical fitness, he was actually completely defenseless in front of Luo Rui. But Luo Rui looks like a normal person and does not have any conditions that could pose a threat to him. Rory stretched out his other hand and grabbed Wilson Fisk's collar, then stood up and lifted Wilson Fisk into the air with one hand. "Listen, I'm a biological scientist. Do you know what a living thing is? Humans are also a kind of living thing. I study this. In my eyes, you are no different from a newborn chick. So, it's best not to touch me in front of me. Understand?" Wilson Fisk nodded subconsciously. Luo Rui patted his bald head with satisfaction, and then couldn't help rubbing it. It was very smooth. "I understand. Let's continue with the topic we were discussing." Wilson Fisk rubbed his wrist, which was almost crushed, and then asked after adjusting his shirt, "Did you just mean to be my bodyguard? What sweet dreams are you having?" Rory continued, "I have to spend most of my time doing experiments in the lab. I don't have time to follow you around. What I mean is that if you encounter danger that you can't handle, you can contact me and I will help you solve the problem." Wilson Fisk was about to ask something when Rory added, "Oh, it's not any trouble. I won't get involved in trouble like starting a war or confronting the authorities. You'd better keep a low profile. If there's any risk of being exposed, I might get rid of you first." Wilson Fisk understood that Rory would not help him deal with his competitors, nor would he offend the authorities for him. The only thing he could do was to save him when he was in personal danger. In the eyes of others, this is no different from paying money to invite an ancestor home. But in Wilson Fisk's eyes, Rory is his life-saving amulet. And Wilson Fisk was more interested in Rory himself than these conditions. After a moment of contemplation, he asked, "Rory, I can provide you with the funds to build a laboratory, and I can even cover all the expenses afterwards. What I want to know is, can I be like you? As strong as me?" Rory pondered for a moment and replied, "Not yet. Give me some time after the lab is established, and maybe I can." "Deal." Wilson Fisk agreed without hesitation. Rory held out his hand with a satisfied smile on his face. "It's a pleasure to work with you." Wilson Fisk looked at Rory's hand and reached out his hand fearfully. After shaking hands, Rory instructed, "Use your name or someone else's to help me find a suitable venue. I will make a list for you later and you can purchase according to the list. How can I contact you during this time?" Rory looked around. Since he had nowhere else to go, he said, "Your place is nice. I'll stay here until I'm done. Please buy me some daily necessities and clothes. I also need a new phone, one registered in someone else's name." After saying that, Rory went to choose an unoccupied guest bedroom. Wilson Fisk, who stayed where he was, twitched his lips, then took out his cell phone and called his most trusted subordinate Wesley, asking him to be responsible for purchasing daily necessities for Rory. In less than half an hour, Wesley bought all the daily necessities Rory needed. "Mr. Fisk, are you okay?" Wilson Fisk didn't let Wesley into the house, but took the things at the door. Noticing Wilson Fisk's abnormality, Wesley couldn't help but ask another question. Wilson Fisk paused, then shook his head, "I'm fine, you go back and rest first. I have important work for you to do tomorrow." "Okay, good night, boss." Wesley can always maintain a stable mood. As Wilson Fisk's most trusted person, he knows exactly what he should do. Closing the door, Wilson Fisk took the things to the living room and put them on the sofa. Just then, Rory came out of the guest bedroom with a list. "Purchase according to the list, which records the detailed models and specifications. Don't buy the wrong one." The list was handed to Wilson Fisk. Rory picked up his brand new phone from the sofa, turned it on and fiddled with it for a while, then unpacked a bunch of stuff and took it back to the guest bedroom. When he came out again, he was wearing a brand new home robe. He walked to the wine cabinet, opened a bottle of foreign liquor whose name he had never heard of, and poured a full glass. After drinking half the cup in one gulp, he asked, "Jin Bing, where do you plan to place my laboratory?" Wilson Fisk thought for a moment and said, "This is my first time investing in a high-end, cutting-edge industry. How about putting the laboratory near Wall Street?" Rory rolled his eyes after hearing this and said, "I suggest you call the police immediately because I suspect your brain has been stolen." Wilson Fisk is certainly not stupid. He even wants to use his investment in the laboratory to promote it and use the media to establish a positive image for himself. But he didn't take into account Rory's real purpose of wanting to keep a low profile. After Rory finished complaining about Kingpin while standing in front of the wine cabinet, he continued, "I really doubt how you climbed to the position of a gang boss. Did you just rely on those dead muscles in your body to fight and rob people?" Wilson Fisk was angry and aggrieved. "But when I think of Rory's overwhelming strength and the chance he might have of gaining this inhuman power, I can only tolerate Rory for a while. Super soldiers are part of military experiments. Captain America was born during World War II. I don't believe you don't know that. So what I need is a secret laboratory. I don't want a large group of armed soldiers to rush into the laboratory one day and arrogantly steal all my experimental results. When it comes to this, the first person Rory thinks of is Steve Rogers. Fortunately, he has finally gotten rid of that trouble now." Chapter 18. The Avengers gather again on their way. Is Rory really over Steve? Not necessarily. Steve didn't know where Rory had gone, and he couldn't handle Rory on his own. So he went straight back to his original timeline from 1970. In 2023, Dr. Banner, with his right hand hanging in front of the quantum tunnel machine, is returning to Countdown. Starting to return. 5.4.3.21. Click. Page 15. Dr. Banner pressed the switch button again, a white light flashed on the quantum tunnel machine, and Steve Rogers instantly appeared on the machine platform. In the eyes of others, Steve Rogers just disappeared for a few seconds. "Hey Captain, is everything going well?" Falcon Sam walked over with a smile. Steve took off his time-traveling suit, his face showing a serious expression as he shook his head. "No, it's not going well at all, and we are in big trouble." "What do you mean?" Dr. Banner and Bucky the Winter Soldier came over. After thinking for a few seconds, Steve told everything that had happened during this period. "You mean that guy named Rory has developed a serum using Thanos blood, and has become more powerful than you? And no one knows where he went?" Steve nodded heavily. "Yes, I know this is all my fault, but the most important thing now is to find Rory. I need everyone's help." Steve himself reflected on this, but he didn't think he was wrong. The disaster brought by Thanos makes everyone nervous. He has even achieved the achievement of destroying half of the population in the universe. If Rory also becomes a person like Thanos, the consequences will be unimaginable. Bucky, the Winter Soldier, came over and patted Steve's arm, comforting him. "We are brothers. Your business is my business." Falcon Sam also said, "That's right, all the Avengers are a team. What we have to do is to deal with all the troubles we encounter." In the eyes of these two people, Rory is not a big trouble. After all, they can even kill Thanos, and little Rory can be easily dealt with. Dr. Banner, who had been silent for a long time, expressed a different opinion. "Guys, Rory isn't the problem. The real problem is how we're going to find him. Rory didn't know when he hit it, and even if he had the technology to travel through time and space, it would still be a hassle to find it." Steve frowned and had a headache for a long time before he said, "Go find Ant-Man Scott and Dr. Pym. They should have a solution. I'll go gather the other Avengers, and we'll have a meeting later to discuss this." Sam suggested that everyone should divide the work, and it would be best to convey this news to everyone. The Avengers in 2023 are discussing how to find Rory, while Rory in 2008 is busy setting up his own new laboratory. Wilson Fisk acted very quickly and found a very secret place for Rory that was suitable for a laboratory the next day. Located on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, the security here is much better than in Hell's Kitchen. It is also a wealthy area with many high-tech companies hidden here. Wilson Fisk rented a huge attic on the top floor of an apartment building. It had a lot of space and a separate elevator, which was just right for Rory to use as a laboratory. There's even plenty of personal living space. When Rory comes in and out, he will be mistaken for a resident here, and no one would have thought that there is a laboratory hidden in the apartment building. A few days later, Rory looked at the fully equipped laboratory with satisfaction and praised Wilson Fisk beside him. "Although your brain isn't very useful, your efficiency is still very good. I'm very satisfied." Wilson Fisk smirked and said, "As long as you're satisfied, if you need anything else, you can always call me." Although he said the promise, he was actually thinking that he would kill Rory as soon as the experimental results came out. Rory certainly had no idea what Wilson Fisk was thinking, and even if he knew, he wouldn't care. "If you have nothing else, go back first. Try not to come here normally. I will notify you in advance if the experiment is successful." After Wilson Fisk left, Rory carefully took out several different blood samples from the box he had brought in 1970 and placed them in the refrigerator. The next step is to culture more blood samples and serum. Although he has been injected with the Thanos gene serum, his current abilities do not satisfy him, or they are not fully developed. Rory worked until late at night to complete the blood culture process. The 3 glass tubes contain Thanos blood, Steve Rogers blood, and Jessica Jones blood respectively. After finishing his work for the day, Rory took off his white coat and went to the living area on the second floor of the attic. "After a quick wash, I made myself a hearty dinner. Sit by the round window and enjoy the delicious food while admiring the night view of Manhattan's Upper East Side." Beep. Brief news: billionaire Tony Stark is currently confirmed missing. A piece of news suddenly popped up on TV. Rory was stunned for a moment, then smiled. What happened in 1970 doesn't seem to have any impact on the present. Rory couldn't figure out whether time travel would have any impact, but there was one thing he was very sure of, that was, whether it was Steve or him, the several time points of time travel were definitely not parallel worlds. Because if Rory hadn't appeared after the end of the war, Steve would have stayed in 1970 and lived a carefree life with Peggy Carter. Steve will then age little by little, and eventually give the shield to the future Falcon. If it is a parallel universe, the old Steve would not be able to meet the future Falcon. So, theoretically, there will be 3 Captain Americas at some point during the Battle of New York? Rory shook his head, throwing those messy thoughts out of his mind. Not to mention 3, even if there were 100 Captain Americas existing at the same time, it would have nothing to do with him. For a period of time afterwards, Luo Rui devoted all his energy to the experiment. Relying on the computing power of that era, Luo Rui quickly replicated the research progress at the time point in 1970. But he was never able to recreate the Thanos serum that he accidentally synthesized. There are hundreds of materials and hundreds of millions of combinations. Even if he is given another 50 years, he will not be able to test them all. Well, it seems that we can only find another way. Rory took off his lab gear, picked up his phone and called Wilson Fisk. Beep, beep, beep. Hey Rory, is the experiment finished? You think the experiment is like cooking? You finish it as soon as you say it's done. Luo Rui said speechlessly, help me find a rare synthetic chemical. I'll text the name to your phone. Notify me immediately when I have any information. Okay, leave it to me. Wilson Fisk agreed readily. But his resentment towards Luo Rui deepened. Chapter 19. Osborn has a giant lizard named Connors. In his spare time studying the Thanos serum, Rory would occasionally study the blood samples of Steve Rogers and Jessica Jones. Compared to Thanos genes, these two people's genes are much milder. The pheromones contained in the gene sequence are very few and only have a reinforcing effect on bodily functions. Thanos serum can be called bloodline, so the serum of these two people can only be regarded as a strengthening mixture at best. As the research on Thanos serum stalled, Rory turned to studying Steve and Jessica Jones's serum. The next morning, Rory finally received news from Wilson Fisk. Jingle bell. Rory, I found the chemical you wanted, but they won't sell it to me. Wilson Fisk spent a lot of effort to find information about the chemical agent, but no matter how much money he offered, the other party refused to sell it to him. Luo Rui was speechless and said, Jin Bing, you are a gang boss. If he doesn't sell it to you, just go and rob him. Why are you pretending to be innocent in front of me? On the other side, Wilson Fisk nearly crushed the phone in his hand. After 2 seconds of silence, he managed to calm down and said, Rory, if possible, I would of course prefer it for free, but they are a big company. If we rob them openly, the consequences could be serious. Wilson Fisk has been busy lately. He's been targeted by Daredevil, the vigilante from Hell's Kitchen, who's searching for evidence of his crimes. In addition, the Russian gang was just eradicated last night, and the whole New York City is in a state of tension. If he offends one of the largest companies in the United States at this time, not to mention that he is a gang boss, even if he is the emperor of the underworld, he will be finished. Luo Rui held his forehead and thought for a while, then said, give me the address, I'll take care of it myself. After hanging up the call, Wilson Fisk immediately sent the address to Rory's cell phone. After changing clothes, I took the elevator down to the first floor lobby. The apartment manager handed over an umbrella with a smile and said, Mr. Luo Rui, it might rain today. I suggest you bring an umbrella. Butler Long, thank you very much. Long, who is about 60 years old, dresses himself very exquisitely, wearing a black three-piece suit and a pair of white gloves, and combing his hair into an American-style slick-back style with mousse. After Luo Rui went out, he took a taxi, told the driver the address, and looked at the street outside the window. Halfway through the journey, a light drizzle began to fall outside the car. Fortunately, Long gave him an umbrella, otherwise he would have been drenched. A few minutes later, I arrived at my destination, paid the fare and tip, opened my umbrella and got out of the taxi. Wei raised his umbrella and looked at the building in front of him. When he saw the name, Luo Rui was slightly stunned. It's actually Osborn Industries. No wonder Wilson Fisk didn't dare to act recklessly. The Osborn Group is not only a biological company, but also a military-industrial enterprise. If it goes head-to-head with such a company, Wilson Fisk will definitely suffer the loss. Luo Rui walked into the Osborn Group, folded his umbrella, and walked to the front desk. He said, hello, I would like to purchase the chemicals your company currently produces. What is the process? The receptionist looked up at Luo Rui, then immediately put on a bright smile and said, purchasing needs to consult the marketing manager. He will match you with the corresponding products and quotes. This is your number plate, please take it. The receptionist came out from behind the counter, handed Luo Rui a queue number card and said, please follow me. Luo Rui nodded and followed behind, his eyes unconsciously drawn to the other person's waist and hips swaying left and right. When they entered the elevator, Luo Rui was still standing at the back. As more and more people got on, the female receptionist slowly moved backwards, and finally she was standing close to Luo Rui. Luo Rui was curious. Are all employees of big American companies so hardworking? They must be spending a lot of money to attract customers. Ding. The elevator door opened and Luo Rui continued to follow the other party to the marketing department floor. Please sit here and wait for a moment. If you like something to drink, I'll get it for you. Page 16. Green tea is fine. He can drink any kind of green tea. Since the injection of the serum, Luo's appetite has become very good. A few minutes later, the receptionist brought a cup of tea and handed it to Luo along with a note. She gave Luo a charming look, then continued to twist her waist and hips and left. Click. The office door opens. Next person. Luo entered the office, placed the tea on the desk, and said, "I need potassium anthoate organic chemical, more than 10 liters. Pata." The staff member behind the desk froze and the pen in his hand fell directly onto the table. "Sorry, I haven't heard of this. I'm pretty sure if you don't know, it's best to contact your superiors." Within 10 minutes, the worker contacted his supervisor, who then contacted his supervisor's supervisor. Finally, it was reported to the board members of Osborne Group. "Hello, I'm Davin, a director of the Osborne Group. As far as I know, this organic chemical has very limited uses and is generally used in genetic engineering. I wonder who you are?" The two shook hands briefly. After releasing him, Luo said, "Luo, a biological genetic scientist." Seeing that Luo admitted his identity, Davin immediately invited him, "How about we go to my office to discuss it in detail? As long as you can give me a little help, I can also give you what you want in return." "No problem at all." Rory followed Davin to the board office floor. As soon as he entered the office, Davin immediately lowered the blinds, then took out a document from his desk drawer and handed it to Rory. "Mr. Luo, I have a lab report here. Could you help me check it? The experimental report does not contain specific experimental data and experimental processes, so it does not involve the issue of leakage." Luo took it in his hand, flipped through it briefly, and said softly, "If I'm not mistaken, this should be the self-healing gene project. Yes, there are many organisms in nature that can heal themselves. If this technology were applied to humans, it would definitely be a great invention. Salamanders, starfish, crabs, earthworms, etc. can all heal and regenerate themselves. Moreover, stem cell regeneration is a topic that human scientists have been studying." Luo closed the lab report, threw it back to Davin, and said, "Biological regeneration is not a new topic. The reason we haven't made any breakthroughs so far is that human technology can't decipher the process and parameters of the decay rate." Davin asked in confusion, "What will happen then?" Luo shrugged. "Maybe it will turn into some other monster. It depends on which biological genes you use as a blueprint." Rory just saw Dr. Connor's signature in the lower right corner of the lab report. Combined with biological regeneration technology, Rory can basically confirm that this Connors is Dr. Lizard. Rory didn't understand why Dr. Lizard appeared, but when he thought that he himself could appear here, the presence of multiple Dr. Lizards didn't seem so strange. Chapter 20, Peggy Carter? You traveled through time too? Luo's trip was not in vain. He got some useful information and also got the chemical he wanted. Back in the laboratory on the top floor of the apartment, Luo once again devoted himself to the experiment of developing the serum. Rory had a hunch that Steve would find him sooner or later. Because that stubborn old Steve won't let him go, Rory wants to get rid of the genetic enhancement in Thanos serum as soon as possible before he is found. Rory called it the Genetic Enhancement Program. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. Rory, who had just finished the experiment, was about to take a break when the picture on TV happened to be the press conference about Tony Stark's return. "I saw young soldiers being killed by the very weapons I was trying to build to protect them," Tony told the camera from his seat below the podium. "I woke up completely and realized that I could contribute more to the world than just making explosive weapons. So, I decided to shut down the weapons manufacturing department of Stark Enterprises. Effective immediately." As Tony Stark announced this decision, the press conference suddenly became chaotic. Anxious Obadiah tried to make amends, but all the cameras were following Tony Stark's departure. Luo originally wanted to watch the fun until he saw a figure in the camera. "Me. Duh. Fa." Rory rubbed his eyes to make sure he saw it right. "Peggy Carter?" Rory actually saw Peggy Carter at Tony Stark's press conference, and it was a younger version of Peggy Carter. What the hell is going on? Luo's brain was burning with smoke, but he couldn't figure out what was going on. Logically or according to the script, Peggy Carter should be an old lady on her deathbed now. How did she live from 70 to 08 without her appearance changing at all? Oh no, are they here to arrest me? Luo is so annoyed. They come chasing him before he can even have a few days of peace. Do they want to let him live? Even though Rory has been injected with the serum, even though he can ravage Steve without a shield, Rory does not think that he can defeat all the Avengers. The Avengers are numerous and powerful, and Thanos, who came with an interstellar army, was reduced to ashes. What is he worth? Rory shook his head vigorously and forced himself to calm down. Without Pym particles and quantum realm channels, I can't go anywhere, so. Luo Rui turned his head to look at the freshly prepared serum on the laboratory table, and then fell into deep thought. No, I can't take the risk. I need more help. Luo Rui immediately had a plan in mind. Peggy Carter returned to SHIELD headquarters from the press conference and immediately called in Level 9 Agent Maria Hill. Any recent news? Hill shook his head. There's been no recent database information about an Asian named Luo Rui. I understand, go and do your work. Peggy Carter had just sat down when a little white mouse suddenly appeared out of nowhere and jumped onto Peggy Carter's legs, then crawled all the way to the top of Peggy Carter's head and squeaked twice. Maria Hill is no stranger to this. Inside SHIELD, Peggy Carter is a living legend, as is the little white mouse she carries with her wherever she goes. Maria Hill walked to the office door and suddenly turned around and asked, Director, Nick Fury has brought Captain America back. Does he need to be awakened immediately? Peggy Carter looked out the window, hesitated for a moment, and shook her head. Wait a little longer, give him some more time. Hill didn't know who the Director Carter was talking about, but this he must be very extraordinary. The other side. Ever since seeing Peggy Carter on TV, Rory has devoted almost all of his time to experiments. Where there is pressure there is motivation. He turned a deaf ear to the outside world and was busy with experiments except for eating and sleeping. In a few days, he turned into a mad scientist with shaggy hair and untidy beard. Ding. The elevator doors opened and Wilson Fisk walked out. Rory, you called me here in such a hurry because the experiment was successful? Wilson Fisk asked, trying hard to suppress the excitement on his face. Clang. A wrench fell to the ground, and Luo Rui, disheveled and covered in oil, walked out of a machine. Wilson Fisk blinked, almost not recognizing Rory himself. Luo Rui wiped his hands, went back to the computer and tapped twice, and the machine suddenly lit up with a blue light. He casually replied, Yes, I'm going to conduct the first phase of the experiment on you. I need to give you a full body check first. This was the first good news Wilson Fisk had heard since he met Rory. Without caring about what happened to Rory, Wilson Fisk immediately walked towards Rory. What do you need me to do? Sit down and do a blood test first. Rory pulled out a syringe and motioned Wilson Fisk to roll up his sleeves. After drawing blood, a drop of blue liquid was added, and Luo Rui put the mixed blood under a microscope for careful observation. Okay, take off your clothes and stand in there. Wilson Fisk did as he was told, stripping down to his boxers and getting inside the machine Rory had been tinkering with. Luo Rui came over with a tube of blue serum, installed it on the instrument, and said, Let me tell you in advance, I can't guarantee success. The enhancement will be carried out in 3 or 4 steps, and you must cooperate with me in the experimental observation after the enhancement. Wilson only felt worried after he lay down in the machine. He tilted his head and looked at Luo Rui who was tying himself up with the bandage and asked, What will happen if the experiment fails? Will I die? Without even looking up, Luo Rui said, No, if the experiment fails, nothing will happen. Maybe your hair will grow back. That's great, come on. I'm ready. Rory glanced at Wilson Fisk, then closed the hatch of the energy chamber. In fact, he had deceived Wilson Fisk, and he himself didn't know what the consequences would be. Besides, it didn't matter to Rory whether he lived or died. Page 17. All he wanted was Wilson Fisk's enhanced physical data. Snapped. He hit the enter key on the computer keyboard, and the light blue serum was immediately injected into Wilson Fisk's body. Then go to another machine and slowly push the current boost switch. The power problem has been improved, and there will not be a city-wide power outage like last time. At most, it will only affect this apartment building. Buzz buzz. As the machine slowly started up, the light inside the machine gradually grew brighter, and the lights in the apartment building suddenly became hazy. Weak current phenomenon, unstable voltage causes the lights to flicker. As the current increased, Wilson Fisk immediately screamed, and the roar even drowned out the sound of the machine working. FK. Being able to swear means there's nothing wrong with Wilson Fisk, so Rory continues to increase the power. Hiss. A spark suddenly appeared from the fuse of the energy cabin, and after reaching its peak, it slowly stopped running. The hatch opened, and Wilson Fisk, steaming from his body, struggled to climb out. Not only did the hair not grow back, but the eyebrows were also burned off. Chapter 21 Gold and Diamond Upgrade. Rory ignored Wilson Fisk, who lay on the ground like a dead dog. Instead, he took out a needle and prepared to draw another tube of blood, but found that the needle could not penetrate, so he replaced it with a vibranium needle. After smoking a full bottle, an ordinary person might even be smoked to death. Rory turned back to study Wilson Fisk's enhanced blood sample. Wilson Fisk lay on the ground and rested for a long time before he recovered. He stood up, pulled a bath towel around himself, and asked with concern, How is it? Is it working? Yes, the genetic level has been enhanced. When you return, remember to send me a detailed physical examination report. I will arrange a second level enhancement test for you. Jinbing clenched his fists. He didn't know if it was a psychological effect or if he had really been strengthened, but he did feel that he seemed to have become a little stronger than before. Although my body feels uncomfortable, my mood is happy. Looking at Luo Rui's back, he asked, Luo Rui, what will happen next time when we strengthen? He will be very strong, probably stronger than Captain America. Without the shield, he will probably not be your opponent. Luo Rui didn't look back. After taking the observation sample, he went straight into the next experiment. Wilson Fisk was confused after hearing this. Have you met Captain America? Of course I've seen him. He's an extreme righteous man and a stubborn old popsicle. You definitely won't like him. Rory input Wilson Fisk's experimental data into the computer and began to simulate Thanos serum enhancement data. Although Thanos looks like a purple potato that has become a spirit, the genetic framework in his body is still human. The Celestials used human genes to create the Eternals and Deviants. After the Eternals split, some of them went to Titan and then Thanos was born. They share the same origin, so Rory can successfully integrate Thanos genes. Rory never spoke to Wilson Fisk again after that. Bored, Wilson Fisk rested, put on his clothes and left the laboratory. After walking out of the apartment building and getting into the car, Wesley, who was waiting in the car, asked in shock, "Boss, why are your eyebrows gone?" Wilson Fisk waved his hand and said, "Drive, go to the boxing gym." The luxury car drove south along 8th Avenue back to Hell's Kitchen. There was a dilapidated underground boxing gym near the church on the 41st block. This was once one of Wilson Fisk's strongholds and where he made his fortune. After entering, he took off his suit jacket and handed it to Wesley beside him, and asked calmly, "How's the matter with the vigilante going?" Wesley followed behind and replied, "We've already notified the police. As soon as he shows up, he'll fall into a trap set in advance. Don't let him continue investigating. Also, find a chance to get rid of that female employee." Wilson Fisk stretched his muscles briefly and came to the sandbag. Bang. Bang. After trying a few punches, he began to gradually increase the strength, and the sandbag was hit with a bang. Wesley received a call at this time. He frowned and said a few simple words before looking up at Wilson Fisk and saying, "Boss, the Italian gang was just robbed by a few thugs. The Italian gang leader Donna and his men were all killed in the basement." Wilson Fisk paused slightly, and the next second all the strength in his body was concentrated on his fist. Boom. The sandbag was torn into two pieces by this punch, and the filling was scattered everywhere in an instant. Oh. God. Wesley was so shocked by the punch that his jaw dropped. He was stunned as if he was meeting Wilson Fisk for the first time. Wilson Fisk looked at his raised fist, squeezed it, and then revealed an arrogant smile. "Go check. I want to know who did this." Wilson Fisk has cooperative relationships with all the gangs in New York City. He has just eradicated the Russian gang, and now the Italian gang has been wiped out. It is hard not to suspect that someone is deliberately targeting him. "Okay, boss. I'll be there right away." Hell's Kitchen is a troubled place where all kinds of crimes happen every day. Wilson Fisk would not be surprised if a few people died, but he would not allow anyone to do whatever he wanted on his territory. Triskelion Building, Washington, D.C. Maria Hill quickened her pace and entered the director's office. "Director Carter, please take a look at this." "What?" Peggy Carter put down the mouse and took the document in confusion. Maria Hill explained, "According to your request, we're monitoring the power supply. 8 hours ago, a large area of power was concentrated in Upper Manhattan. An hour ago, there was another power concentration. After investigation, we found that the power converged at the same location, here." Maria Hill pointed to the spot marked on the document. Peggy Carter's expression instantly became tense when she heard this. He ordered, "Don't arrange for anyone to get close, so as not to alert the enemy." Maria Hill didn't understand why Peggy Carter was so nervous, but as an agent, she knew she shouldn't ask questions. Peggy Carter frowned and thought for a long time, then said, "Notify Nick Fury and ask him to give me a thawing report on Captain America immediately." Quickly. Maria Hill went to carry out Peggy Carter's orders. Peggy Carter grabbed the little white mouse and held it in her hands. She walked to the window, looked out at the river, and murmured, "Steve, I've found him. Why haven't you shown up yet?" Captain America, who was frozen in the Arctic, had actually been dug out by Peggy Carter a long time ago. The reason why he was not thawed immediately was because she had some thoughts in her mind. Because she knew Steve Rogers, as long as Rory showed up, the future Steve would definitely come back. What would happen if the current Steve was thawed and the future Steve came back, and two Steves appeared in front of her at the same time? She loved Steve, but she couldn't love two Steves at the same time. Peggy Carter sighed plaintively. Rory showed up, but the future Steve didn't come back. She had no choice but to wake up the present Steve. 10 minutes later, Cyclops Nick Fury found Peggy Carter with a thawing report on Captain America. Director Carter, all preparations have been completed and Captain America can be thawed at any time. Peggy Carter signed her name on the report. He handed it back to Nick Fury and said, "Get started. Perform a psychological test on Steve as soon as he's thawed. If there's no problem, bring him to see me." "Okay, Chief." Captain America may not be Rory's opponent, but he is the only superpowered person that SHIELD can currently use. At this time, Rory didn't know that he had been targeted by Peggy Carter. After strengthening Wilson Fisk 8 hours ago, Rui quickly arranged a second serum strengthening for himself through various data analysis and calculations. Rui sat in front of the laboratory table with his bare chest and a bath towel wrapped around him, observing his blood sample after the second enhancement. Chapter 22, Battle Power Comparison, The Trash of the Hand Will Die. After the second serum enhancement, Rui could clearly feel that his body was stronger than before. Because there is no comparison, it is still unknown to what extent it is strong. In terms of combat power in the MUC world, in Rui's mind, apart from some top bosses in the universe, only Thanos with the 6-stone glove can be ranked in the S level. Scarlet Witch and Storm Rage are at A+. Ordinary Thanos, Captain Marvel, and Hela are in Class A. Ultron, Vision, Hulk A-. Iron Man and Doctor Strange are at B+ level, Captain America, Bucky the Winter Soldier, Ant-Man, and Spider-Man are at B level, and Black Panther and Star-Lord are at B level. Kingpin, Crossbones, Black Widow Natasha, Hawkeye Barton, Daredevil, and the like can be classified as C level, and the worst C level is above ordinary people. If ranked according to this combat power, Rui believes that he can at least be ranked around B level. Of course, the ranking of combat power on paper is not absolute, and it will be affected by many external factors when fighting in real life. For example, there is a big difference between Captain America with a shield and without a shield. After being strengthened again, Rui felt much more at ease. The second phase of the gene enhancement plan has been completed, and the next thing to do is the preliminary work for the third phase of gene enhancement. The reason why it is so troublesome is that the strength of human genes cannot fully carry the genes of the Eternals. He can only carry out step-by-step strengthening, just like building a building layer by layer. Page 18. During his breaks, Rory would turn on the TV. Lately, almost all the news out there was about Stark Industries. The Weapons Research and Development Department was closed, and Stark Industries' stock plummeted. Obadiah wanders around trying to restart the Weapons Research and Development Department, but Tony Stark himself disappears, but no one can change Tony Stark's determination to shut down the Weapons Department. Half a month passed in a flash. Rory has hardly left his apartment during this period. There are cameras everywhere outside. If he is discovered by SHIELD, it will definitely be a big trouble for him now. Late at night, Rui, who had just finished the experiment, returned to bed. Before he even had time to fall asleep, he heard faint footsteps coming from the rooftop. Rooftop? He's on the top floor. Who would go walking on someone else's roof in the middle of the night without sleeping? Zikwa. The locked window was pried open from the outside, and 2 dark shadows sneaked in from the window. Moreover, the footsteps on the roof did not disappear, which meant that there were more than just these 2 people coming in. At first, Rory thought that the people who came were from SHIELD, but after he found that the 2 men were wearing ninja uniforms, he guessed what kind of people they were. Click. Rui pressed the switch on the wall, and the room was instantly brightly lit. The 2 ninjas who were rummaging through something in front of the lab table were startled and muttered something in bird language that Rui couldn't understand. Rui stood in front of the handrail on the 2nd floor, looking down at the stairs, and asked, "Can you 2 tell me what you are looking for?" Ding ding ding. Rui subconsciously turned to the left and looked at the iron frame behind him and found 3 ninja darts stuck on it. Swish. The 2 men drew their ninja swords and rushed towards Rui. "You bastard. Not only did you steal things, you even tried to silence me." Now Rook was no longer a soft persimmon that anyone could bully. Not only did he not hide, but he rushed towards the 2 of them. Swish, he dodged the knife and hit back with a punch. Bang. The ninja flew backwards and smashed the experimental table into pieces. Another ninja swung his sword, but Rui grabbed his wrist. The ninja wanted to retreat but couldn't break free. Rory slammed the captured ninja to the ground. Boom. Then there was a crack sound, and Rui's foot crushed his chest. It was obvious that he was not going to survive. Another ninja who was knocked away stood up and tried to escape by jumping out the window. Rui picked up the dead ninja sword and swung it hard at him. Laugh. Boom. The ninja's body was pierced by the samurai sword, and then nailed to the wall under the huge force of the samurai sword. Then he looked up at the ceiling and heard the sound of messy footsteps gradually fading away. It was likely that they ran away. Rory took out his cell phone and called Wilson Fisk, but maybe he fell asleep because it was too late, so the call took a long time to get through. "Kingpin, come to my place, now." On the other side, Jinping was dizzy and the phone was hung up before he could even open his mouth. "Damn it!" Wilson Fisk complained inwardly, but he still sat up from the bed obediently. When Kingpin came to Luo Rui, he was stunned when he saw the messy laboratory and the two corpses. Rory came out of the bathroom and went downstairs while drying his hair with a towel. "I know you have a cooperative relationship with the Hand. Please ask them what this means. And by the way, send someone to deal with it. Remember to clean it up." Wilson Fisk nodded slightly and immediately took out his cell phone to contact his men to come and deal with the body. Then he called Mrs. Gao from the Shuhi Society. We talked for about 3 minutes before hanging up. At this time, Luo Rui had already put all kinds of blood samples and serums into the password box, and collected all kinds of file data, including the data stored in the computer hard drive. After packing up, he turned to look at Wilson Fisk. Wilson Fisk hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, Rory, this matter may have something to do with me." Luo Rui didn't say anything, waiting patiently for his explanation. Wilson Fisk sighed, "I encountered a difficult guy not long ago. Although I managed to deal with him temporarily, the Hand discovered the changes in me. They found my shopping list and traces of my past and found me here. They want to know the reason for the changes in my body. So, this is your explanation?" Wilson Fisk is a man with rich fighting experience. He can roughly judge that Rory is much stronger than him from the collapsed chest of the ninja on the ground and the situation of the ninja hanging on the wall. So it's not the time to turn against each other yet. After thinking for a few seconds, Wilson Fisk said, "I will take care of this matter, but it will take some time. 3 days, I'll give you 3 days at most." Rory's main trouble comes from Shield, and he doesn't want to waste his energy on such trivial matters, but if Wilson Fisk can't give him a perfect answer, Rory doesn't mind dealing with the Hand. 15 minutes later, Wesley came with 2 of his men, took the body away, wiped the blood, and helped Rory tidy up the laboratory. The next day, Rory dressed neatly, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, and left the apartment carrying a box containing the serum and information. Prepare to find a safe place to hide to avoid being found by people with bad intentions. As soon as he stepped out of the apartment door, Rory realized something was wrong. People were coming and going on the street, but there were a few people who seemed to be looking at him. Luo Rui got into a taxi as if nothing had happened, looked back through the rearview mirror, and sure enough, 2 black SUVs were quietly following him. P.S. Brothers, if you have recommendation tickets, please vote, and if you haven't invested, please click to invest. Although it has not been recommended yet, Xia Junjun still wants to move up the ranking of the new book list. Xia Junjun really wants to improve. Chapter 23 The Arrogant Old Popsicle Who Just Woke Up. Please take me to 44th Street on 8th Avenue. Okay sir. The taxi driver answered readily. Luo Rui looked at the driver curiously, then turned his head and continued to look at the 2 black SUVs behind him. The taxi was driving south along 5th Avenue from the Upper East Side. When it was about to enter Midtown, the driver suddenly swerved the steering wheel and stopped the car at the intersection. The next second the driver pulled out a gun and pressed it against Rory's temple. "Put your hands on your head, man, don't do that." Bang. A lightning-fast fist hit the driver's face, and he fainted instantly. Luo Rui just realized that there was something wrong with the driver. A normal taxi driver would never agree to take a passenger into Hell's Kitchen so readily unless he was not afraid. I opened the car door and got out. There was not a single pedestrian or passing vehicle at the entire intersection. It was obviously the work of Shield. Police cars blocked the road, SHIELD agents surrounded the intersection, and the 2 black SUVs that followed stopped not far away. Click. Peggy Carter, with her medium-length wavy brown hair, got out of the car and greeted Rory with a smile. "Lori, long time no see." Rory shrugged, "How could that be? We met a month ago. It may be a month for you, but it's 38 years for me. That's long enough." After Peggy Carter finished speaking, Rory was stunned for a moment and asked doubtfully, "You're talking nonsense. How could your appearance remain unchanged in 38 years? Do you think you're a witch?" Peggy Carter chuckled. "Of course I'm not a witch. If you want to know the answer, why don't you come back and talk with me?" Rory snorted and took a few steps forward. "Aren't you afraid I'll break your neck?" As long as he got closer, Rory was sure to control Peggy Carter in an instant, and with her in his hands, he could leave here safely. Peggy Carter seemed to see through Rory's intentions and raised her hand to stop him. "Rory, please stand still. It is not wise to start a conflict here. Do you think these agents can stop me?" Rory didn't stop. Just as Rory was about to take action, another voice came over, "Sir, you'd better listen to her. The blue color paired with the red and white striped tights, a half-face covering helmet, and a pair of long bright red gloves is simply ugly." He stood in front of Peggy Carter with a round shield in one hand. "Steve." Rory subconsciously stopped and turned to look around. He wanted to confirm whether there were other Avengers around. Steve, who had just woken up and finished rehabilitation training, frowned slightly and said, "Since you know me, please cooperate with our investigation." Hearing Steve say this, Rory felt instantly relieved. With a smile on his face, he said, "You old popsicle boy, you are so arrogant. Didn't Peggy Carter tell you who I am?" Steve shook his head slightly and said, "It doesn't matter who you are. What matters is that you need to come with us now." "No, no, no." Rory shook his finger and said, "You're just an old antique who's been frozen for nearly 70 years. You're out of date." Steve turned his head and glanced at Peggy Carter, and said softly, "Peggy, the negotiations have failed, it seems that we have no choice but to use force." Page 19. No. Peggy Carter wanted to negotiate peacefully, but her voice was still a step too late. Steve turned around and instantly threw the vibranium shield towards Rory. With a buzzing sound, Rory dodged the taxi behind him and bounced into the air. When he straightened his body and looked at Steve again, he had already rushed in front of Rory. Bang. Boom. The knee hit Rory's chest with a dull sound, but Rory just took 2 steps back and was not seriously injured. Steve's eyes froze for a moment, then he took the shield that bounced back and attacked Rory again. Rory suppressed his smile, held the box of serum in his left hand, and punched Steve with his right fist. Ding. The fist hit the vibranium shield with a loud noise, and a wave of air spread out from the shield, slightly blowing up the hem of Peggy Carter's skirt. This is what Rory hates. With the shield, Steve is like a turtle hiding in its shell, making it impossible to deal with him. Peggy Carter said that Rory was not an ordinary person, but Steve, who still retained his thinking from 70 years ago, did not take it seriously. Only after a real fight did he realize that Rory was not weaker than him at all. He barely dodged Rory's incoming punch, then rammed his shield into Rory's chest. Rory took 2 steps back, reached out to grab the car door, and forcibly pulled the taxi door down. Banging. Banging. Rory swung the car door wildly at Steve, who held up his shield to block it. When Rory raised the car door again, Steve subconsciously raised his shield, but the car door did not fall down, but a foot landed on Steve's chest. Boom. Steve, who was kicked away, crashed heavily into the side of a black SUV not far away. The entire car body was deformed and dented by Steve. Cough. Steve almost fainted because he couldn't catch his breath, but fortunately he had rich combat experience and strong willpower. He stood up very reluctantly and groaned, "I can spend a whole day with you like this. Here we go again. Can't you just change your lines?" At this moment, the sniper who had set up a sniper rifle not far away suddenly pulled the trigger. Puff. A long white needle was inserted into Rory's arm, which turned out to be an anesthetic. Damn, I was careless. Puff puff puff. Dense anesthetic needles shot towards Rory at the same time. Rory grabbed the car door and ran away. Steve chased after him, clutching his aching chest. The 2 enhanced humans were as fast as the wind, even 2 times faster than the cars on the road. "Get in the car. Chase." Peggy Carter ordered, and all the agents immediately got in the car and chased after them. Rory felt a little dizzy and his limbs were a little stiff as he crossed a shopping mall. Instead, Steve behind was getting closer and closer. "It's a dogskin plaster." Rory cursed inwardly and rushed into the subway station. When he got off the platform, a subway was about to start. Rory jumped up instantly, smashed the glass with 1 punch and rushed into the subway car. When Steve, who was chasing after him, arrived, the subway had already gradually disappeared into the depths of the tunnel. "Peggy, he got on a subway car going to Brooklyn." "Roger that." In the subway, Rory swayed from side to side like a drunk, and walked slowly towards the rear of the train. At this time, a gangster set his eyes on the box in Rory's hand, came over, snatched it and tried to run away. Rory was not unconscious yet. He grabbed the gangster and crushed his wrist with a little force. Just 1 second after the scream started, Rory threw him away and hit the carriage, and the gangster fell asleep. Seeing this, others immediately stayed away. Rory guessed that S.H.I.E.L.D. would deploy personnel at the next stop, so he went to the rear of the car, opened the trunk door, and jumped in without hesitation. Oh my god. My god. The passengers in the car were all shocked when they saw Rory jump out of the car. Some people wanted to call 911, but there was no signal in the subway. The subway stopped at the next station, and a large group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents immediately rushed in. After knowing that Luo Rui jumped out of the car halfway, he immediately reversed and chased him. But when these people arrived at the point where Luo Rui jumped out of the car, there was no sign of Luo Rui. Chapter 24 Uncle Fa wants to kill me. There are many maintenance passages in subway tunnels. The SHIELD agents were short of manpower and did not find any trace of Rory. After the anesthetic wore off, Luo Rui woke up 3 hours later. The first thing he did when he woke up was to check if there was any problem with the box containing the serum. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, he stood up from the wet ground and groped his way forward bit by bit. "Haven't you found it yet?" Peggy Carter asked, standing in the middle of the tunnel. The agent shook his head. The maintenance tunnel is as complex as a maze. Without a map, it would be difficult to complete the search. Peggy Carter sighed helplessly, glanced at the time on her watch and said, "We can't continue to affect the operation of the subway line. Let's go back and talk about it." Peggy Carter thought she would fail to catch him. Steve had competed with Rory in 1970, but he failed to catch him then either. What makes Peggy Carter uncomfortable is that it may be difficult to find Rory again after the failure. But she was not in a hurry, because she knew that Rory no longer had the PIM particles to continue traveling through time and space. As long as he was still in this world, she would be able to find Rory sooner or later. All agents withdraw to headquarters. Peggy Carter returned to her office, followed by Captain America Steve Rogers. "Peggy, are you okay?" Steve asked with concern from a distance. Peggy Carter forced a smile and shook her head. "I'm fine, you go back and rest first." Steve was very confused. He thought that his relationship with Peggy Carter would heat up quickly, but after being together for half a month, he found that Peggy Carter seemed to be avoiding him intentionally or unintentionally. Of course Peggy Carter wouldn't tell Steve the real reason. Steve thought that because he had been frozen for too long, Peggy Carter already had a new love. "I can only hide this love deep in my heart while feeling sad." As soon as Steve left, Maria Hill walked into Peggy Carter's office. "Commissioner, please take a look at this." The tablet was handed to Peggy Carter, who took it and tapped on it a few times, then gradually frowned after zooming in. The picture was taken by a satellite. Because it was dark, the picture was not very clear. You could barely make out a human-shaped creature with flames under its feet flying around in the sky. The footage was shot in the airspace near Malibu, California, and resembles the mesh-armed humanoid weapons in the movie. Peggy Carter returned the tablet to Maria Hill and instructed, "Notify Nick Fury to investigate this matter. Also, contact Natasha and Hawkeye and tell them to come back immediately. Rory is too strong, and Steve Rogers is no match for him." Peggy Carter plans to send the most powerful agent to form a team with Steve to prepare in advance for the next capture of Rory. "Okay, I'll contact you right away." Maria Hill was about to leave when Peggy Carter stopped her and asked, "How's the lab search going at Rory's apartment?" "Agent Carlson is in charge. Nothing else has been discovered so far, aside from some chemical agents." "I know, go get busy." Late at night, Luo Rui climbed back to the ground from a sewer shaft, identified the direction, and left immediately. Walked through the damp and dark alleys, trying to avoid places with cameras. A police car on the main street suddenly turned and drove towards Luo Rui. Luo Rui immediately dodged and hid deep in the alley, preparing to leave in another direction. This might be the back door of a bar or restaurant. Two people whose faces cannot be seen clearly are hiding by the door, smoking cigarettes. Luo Rui didn't pay attention. Just as he passed by the two of them, a crisp sound suddenly rang in his ears. Click. It was the sound of a gun being loaded. Luo Rui subconsciously stopped and turned to look. A pistol was pointed at Luo Rui's head. "Boy, what's that in your hand? Open it and take a look." The silver-white password box looks very high-end. Such high-end things basically do not appear in Hell's Kitchen. The only time this gangster has seen such a high-end box is when his boss used it to store money. That's why he had evil intentions when Luo Rui passed by. Page 20. Luo Rui did not answer the gangster's question, but looked up and down at the other person's figure. "Damn, are you mute?" The muzzle of the gun hit Luo Rui's head, and when he was about to threaten him again, the next second a pistol appeared in Luo Rui's hand. "Mr. Shit, please calm down." He gave in immediately and knew the situation very well. At this moment, a burst of gunfire suddenly rang out from the house behind the door, which was even more lively than the firecrackers during the New Year. It was a chaotic mess mixed with roars and screams. Boom. The back door was kicked open and a strong man walked out. He raised his hand and blew the head of another gangster, then raised his gun and aimed at Luo Rui. Bang. Luo Rui reacted quickly and pulled the gangster over to block himself. After the gunshot, blood sprayed all over Luo Rui. The other party wanted to shoot Luo Rui as well, but the next moment, the gangster who was shot in the head rushed towards the strong man who fired the gun. Of course he wouldn't move after being shot in the head, he was thrown by Luo Rui. The sturdy man dodged immediately, and when he looked back, Rory was already standing in front of the sturdy man who fired the gun. Snapped. A slap knocked the gun out of the sturdy man's hand. The sturdy man reacted quickly and punched Rory immediately. There was a muffled bang sound. Rory stood there and nothing happened, but the strong man who was punching others felt terrible pain in his hands. He refused to believe it and kicked Rory again while covering his painful right hand, but Rory held his ankle firmly in his hand. Rory asked softly, "Is there something wrong with you?" The strong man's voice was neither happy nor sad, as if he had seen through life and death. He said, "Either kill me or let me go. There is no point in living now anyway." This left Rory confused. "You killed a bunch of people and then said your life was meaningless? Isn't this typical revenge against society?" Rory asked curiously, "Why do you come out to kill people when your life has no meaning? It would be much better to commit suicide. Death would put an end to everything." "No. I want revenge for my wife and child." The burly man with the buzz cut reacted emotionally. He struggled to retract his ankle, which was being held by Rory, and said, "I still have an enemy I haven't killed. Let me go. Let me go." Sizzle. Sparks suddenly appeared from the wires above their heads, and the flash of light allowed Rory to see the other person's face clearly. "Fine uncle." The Punisher's full name is Frank Custer. He is a member of the Marine Corps. He is proficient in various combat and firearms use, has superb combat skills, and is also good at underwater operations, torture, and intelligence gathering. He doesn't have any superpowers, but he has killed the most people among all superheroes. Because he saw something he shouldn't have seen during a dinner party in the park with his wife and children, his entire family was brutally murdered. Only Frank escaped. Later, he found the murderer through various connections, but the murderer eventually escaped the punishment of the law. Disappointed, Frank decided to avenge his family in his own way. It is precisely because of these experiences that Frank turned evil, and in the future he has only one attitude towards all crimes, that is, to kill without mercy. P.S. More updates for all book lovers. Thanks to Let's Talk Again 1,000 years later for the 1,500 reward, and thanks to for the 100 reward. Thank you all book friends for your monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. Because it is the new book period, adding more chapters is definitely a big problem. Currently, there are more than 6 manuscripts in stock. Before publishing the new chapter, some typos will be corrected, omissions are inevitable, and some minor adjustments will be made. The success of this book is up to you brothers. The only thing I can do is to tell the story well and try to sell as much as possible after it is put on the shelves, provided that the plot is not spoiled. Welcome everyone to comment and like, and provide more inspiration. If you have a recommendation ticket, please vote. If you haven't invested, please click to invest. Thank you, brothers. Chapter 25, Moving to a New Home and Starting to Live Together with Uncle Fa. So the people inside are gang members, and you're seeking revenge for your wife and children? Rory let go of Frank, but Frank turned and left without saying a word. This is very uncle punishment. Rory looked at Frank's back and said calmly, "If you want revenge and find the mastermind behind this, I can help you." Frank really stopped and turned around and walked back to Rory. He growled and questioned, "What did you just say?" Rory shrugged, "Nothing serious. I just said I could help you." "How do you want to help me?" Frank's words were very interesting, as if Rory was begging for help. People with ability are very conceited, like old popsicle Steve Rogers, who didn't take Rory seriously, but was beaten up by Rory. Rory didn't answer Frank's question, but reached for a steel pipe against the wall. He broke it off with a little force, then kneaded it in his hands a few times and rolled it into an iron lump. Is this something a human could do? Frank was stunned. Rory raised the corner of his mouth and asked, "Is this enough?" Frank smacked his lips. "How am I supposed to find you? You won't be able to find me unless you follow me now." Frank followed Rory without saying a word, and the two gradually disappeared into the deepest part of the alley. Wilson Fisk had just visited Madame Gao of the Hand. The negotiations went smoothly, and the Hand would no longer bother Rory, on the condition that Rory would give a copy of the enhanced serum to Mrs. Gao after completing it. Wilson Fisk's idea is very simple. He first uses Rory to strengthen his body, and then controls Rory in turn to help him create more super soldiers. By the time Wilson Fisk had dealt with Mrs. Gao, something happened to Rory. The apartment laboratory was sealed and Rory disappeared. A distraught Wilson Fisk returned home, turned on the light, went to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a half-full glass of whiskey. When I turned around, I saw 2 people sitting on the sofa in the living room, one of them was Rory. "Oh God, it's great that you're still alive. This is..." Wilson Fisk turned his head to look at the Punisher Frank who was covered in blood. Rory was fiddling with the laptop and casually replied, Don't worry about him, tell me about your side of the story. Wilson Fisk knew Rory was talking about the hand. He immediately replied, I've spoken to the hand, and they won't bother you anymore. That's all? Rory looked up from his laptop screen to Wilson Fisk. Wilson Fisk said in embarrassment, Rory, the hand is one of my very important partners, and so are you. This puts me in a very difficult position. The hand has lost 2 people, and you haven't lost anything either. Why not just let it go? Luo Rui frowned and thought about it, then after a moment his brows relaxed and he said, I understand. He neither agreed nor refused, but the name of the hand was already recorded on Luo Rui's blacklist. Frank, who was watching the conversation between the two, felt it was strange, but had no intention of interrupting. Luo Rui closed his notebook and continued, the lab is no longer usable. Please help me find a more secret place. I also need your help procuring some equipment. It would be best if we could buy it from another city so that no one can find out. Now that S.H.I.E.L.D. has found the laboratory, they may track the origin of the experimental equipment. What Luo Rui needs most is quiet before the genetic enhancement is completed. Wilson Fisk immediately said, of course, no problem. Leave it to me. After saying that, he immediately took out his cell phone and contacted Wesley. Wesley was very reliable and found a suitable hiding place in no time. After giving the address to Rory, Rory immediately took Frank and the box containing the serum sample and left Wilson Fisk's residence. As they walked down the street, Frank suddenly said, that man just now had bad intentions towards you. Luo Rui smiled indifferently and said, of course I know, but I still need his help for the time being, so I pretended not to know. At this point, Luo Rui turned his head and looked at Frank seriously, Frank, when you have absolute power, all conspiracies and tricks will become as fragile as paper. Maybe you're right, but I prefer my own way of doing things. While the two were chatting, they turned left and right in Hell's Kitchen and came to a very secret semi-underground entrance. Open the door and behind it is another staircase leading down. Frank walked around downstairs and came back to Rory. He said, this is a double-story basement, very secluded. I think what we need most right now is 2 beds for sleeping. Luo Rui was very satisfied with the place. How about leaving the shopping for daily necessities to you? What about you? Frank looked at Rory. Luo Rui said as a matter of course I am doing research and trying to help you become stronger as soon as possible. The Avengers are not yet formed, which is the best stage for Rory to develop, so Rory plans to find something for S.H.I.E.L.D. to do outside, so that S.H.I.E.L.D. won't always cause trouble for him. Starting from the next day, Frank went out repeatedly to buy daily necessities, and all of them were double portions, fully prepared to live with Rory. The experimental equipment Luo Rui needed was delivered 3 days later. Alright legends, that's it for today. Like, subscribe, and I'll meet you in the next audiobook.